What quiet signs revealed the Earth's decline? How did departing travellers say farewell to their homeworld? In the fading light of an evening sky, Earth basked in the afterglow of its golden age. For generations, life had flourished under gentle sunlit days and starlit nights. Oceans brimmed with fish, forests thrummed with the songs of birds and insects, and humanity thrived in harmony with the generous land. There was a time when each day dawned with the promise of abundance, and the world seemed boundless and eternal. It was a time of plenty and peace. Rivers ran clear, and harvests were bountiful beneath blue skies. People laughed easily, their hearts unworried by want or fear. The air felt fresh and lightly perfumed by blossoms that opened with each sunrise. In warm afternoons, children chased butterflies through meadows, and in the evenings, families gathered under the soft glow of twilight, content and secure in the world they knew. In those halcyon days, humanity's spirit was as vibrant as the natural world around it. Music, art, and stories filled the air in every town, reflecting the optimism of an era that seemed endless. On warm nights, city parks would be alive with families and friends, singing old songs and dreaming of the future under a canopy of stars. In quiet villages, elders told tales of how the world had grown kinder and more prosperous in their lifetime. Everyone believed that tomorrow would arrive as gently as the sunrise, bringing more of the same goodness that today had offered. This prosperity felt as natural as breathing. Cities glowed with light and life, and even the wilderness beyond them was vibrant and full. Under the kindly watch of the heavens, it seemed nothing could disrupt the splendid balance. The earth gave of itself generously, fruit from the trees, water from deep wells, kindness from the soil beneath our feet. And in return, humanity flourished, building its dreams tall into the sky, confident that tomorrow would mirror today's blessings. Yet, even in those halcyon days, subtle signs began to whisper of change. Small deviations in the familiar rhythms went mostly unnoticed at first. One year, the rains arrived a little later than anyone remembered. On another, the summer heat lingered too long into autumn, its breath oddly warm when the air should have cooled. In quiet forests at the edge of bustling towns, a few less fireflies danced on summer nights, their absence a tiny, almost imperceptible loss. Here and there, a few voices did quietly raise concern. A handful of farmers discussed how the weather felt different from their father's time. A scientist noted record temperatures in her logbook and wondered what they foretold. An elder, watching the migratory birds arrive a week late to the lake by his home, furrowed his brow in worry. But such murmurs were rare and easily drowned out by the chorus of daily life. For most, the changes were too slight to measure against memories of abundance. The world was still so full of life and promise that it was easy to believe the golden age would endure forever. Such moments were fleeting and easily brushed aside. After all, the world still appeared so bountiful. A gentle breeze might carry an unexpected warmth in winter, but then life went on as usual the next day. Most folks scarcely gave these anomalies a passing thought, chalking them up to nature's caprice. The harvests were still rich, the rivers still flowed, and the stars still shone in familiar patterns overhead. Earth's twilight of abundance was beautiful, tranquil, and deceptively enduring. As the last light of one more golden day faded into dusk, the sky painted itself in hues of rose and gold. It was a breathtaking sight that repeated itself countless evenings, reassuring in its constancy. But on this evening, perhaps one or two souls paused a moment longer, sensing an undertone beneath the beauty. A red sun lingered just a moment more than usual at the horizon, as if reluctant to leave. The colours were magnificent, but to a keen eye they seemed tinged with something new. A haze, a subtle dimming that hinted at the slightest imbalance. Even then, the vast majority of people remained at ease, cradled in the comfort of what they knew. Birds still chirped softly from the trees as darkness fell. City lights blinked on like earthly stars, and laughter floated on the breeze from open windows. Earth, our home, still cradled us kindly. In that gentle twilight, everything felt as it should, peaceful and abundant, the troubles of the world kept at bay. Yet those almost imperceptible whispers of something shifting were there, growing just a bit louder with each passing season, waiting for ears to hear them. Seasons continued to turn, but their pattern was becoming unfamiliar. The whispers of change grew a little louder as years passed. Gentle rains that once nourished the fields became fickle, sometimes failing to arrive at all, leaving the soil dry and cracked underfoot. In other places, rain fell too long and too hard, beyond what the land could absorb. Rivers that had flowed steadily since living memory now ran shallow and uncertain, their banks widening into thirsty mudflats in the heat of late summer. Communities noticed these shifts in quiet, uneasy ways. Elders in small villages furrowed their brows at the erratic weather, recalling that in their youth the seasons followed a steadier rhythm. Harvest festivals grew more subdued when crops came in stunted or sparse. At night, around dimly lit tables, families spoke in hushed tones about the failed monsoon or the untimely frost that withered their orchards. There was no open panic, only a growing concern that settled like a weight on the chest, acknowledged mostly in whispers and worried glances. A coastal town that had stood for centuries quietly emptied, as encroaching tides turned its streets brackish and uninhabitable. In a once fertile valley, farmers watched with resignation as their wells went dry, and their young people departed in search of greener lands. These changes unfolded without fanfare, just gradual adjustments and migrations that spoke louder than any headline. Across the world, small traditions were broken. Harvest dances cancelled for lack of harvest. Winter festivals without snow to celebrate. Life went on, but in subtle ways, people everywhere began to sense that the ground beneath their lives was shifting. Nature herself whispered her warnings. On the wind carried the smell of distant forest fires. An acrid hint of burning carried from far-off woodlands that had become tinder dry. In the oceans, coral reefs lost their vivid colours, fading to pallid ghosts beneath the waves. Fishermen returning from the sea found their nets coming up light, as the fish they relied upon had moved on to cooler waters or simply vanished. Birds changed their migratory paths without fanfare, arriving early or not at all. Each change was a small voice joining a growing chorus that something fundamental was shifting. Even the ground beneath people's feet gave subtle signals. In some regions, the permafrost that had held firm for millennia began to soften and sag, altering familiar landscapes. Hillsides quietly gave way in sudden landslides after unrelenting rains. Along the coasts, the sea crept inland, bit by bit, nibbling away at beaches and salt marshes that had buffered the shore for ages. Ancient trees, once anchors of the soil, toppled in storms that were just a little stronger than generations past. The earth was beginning to move to a new rhythm, less predictable and gently unsettled. Society responded with a cautious, reverent attention. People adapted where they could. planting new crops that might withstand drought, building walls against rising tides. Scientists presented careful data showing trends that were becoming hard to deny, charts of warming seas and melting ice, though they too spoke in measured, respectful tones, as if raising their voices might shatter the fragile calm. Leaders met under flags of truce to discuss these troubling signs, and for a time, hope lingered that concerted action could quiet the whispers and restore balance. Yet year by year, these whispers of decline grew ever more pronounced, no longer just isolated curiosities, but part of everyday life. A kind of collective realization dawned slowly. The changes they were witnessing were not a passing phase, but the early steps of a grand transition. Still, life went on. Children continued to play in the sun, though their parents watched the skies more warily. Markets opened each morning, though fishermen and farmers offered what little they had. In the background of ordinary days, the subtle warnings persisted, the uneasy feeling that the golden age was gently, inexorably slipping away. Year by year, the seasons themselves began to defy expectation. The once reliable cycle of spring, summer, autumn, and winter unraveled into something new and erratic. One spring, flowers bloomed too early, coaxed out by an unexpected burst of warmth in what should have been the depths of winter. Then a late frost would descend without warning, gentle blossoms wilting under an icy touch that came too late in the season. Summer days grew hotter and longer, stretching well into the time autumn used to reign, until leaves that should have turned gold and red simply shriveled in relentless heat. Soon, the very idea of distinct seasons began to blur. In some years, autumn never arrived. Summer's heat simply lingered, yielding briefly to a pale imitation of winter before returning again. In other places, rains pounded for months on end, washing away the line between spring and summer in a haze of grey skies and flooded fields. Old farmers scratched their heads, unable to read the signs of the sky as their ancestors once did. The knowledge passed down through generations, when to sow, when to harvest, when to expect the monsoon or the snow, was becoming uncertain lore. The natural world struggled to adjust. In forests, some trees tried to sprout new leaves out of season, confused by the unpredictable temperature and light. Migratory birds, guided by ancient instincts, attuned to a climate that no longer existed, arrived at northern breeding grounds only to find the lakes still frozen, or flew south too late and met scorching drought. The familiar rhythms that had governed life for eons were now out of sync, like a great clock that had lost its hands. With each passing year, records shattered quietly. The hottest day ever recorded would be surpassed the next summer. Then again, the following one. The coldest winters became just a memory told by grandparents to wide-eyed children who had never seen snow. Where once gentle snows fell every year, now green winters persisted, leaving mountain peaks barren of their white crowns. Elsewhere, where rain was once scarce, sudden deluges carved new rivers into the landscape overnight. Even the great ice sheets at the planet's poles were receding beyond any past record, their edges carving silently into rising seas. Vast glaciers that had stood for millennia withdrew further each summer, leaving behind raw, barren earth and cold, uncontained oceans. Sea levels crept upward in response, salting fertile deltas and lapping at the edges of coastal towns. Some low-lying islands that once bloomed with villages and palm groves were gradually claimed by the encroaching tides, their beaches and homes surrendered to the sea. These changes brought dramatic scenes. Yet even those played out in oddly hushed tones. A city by the sea might find its streets flooded by a swollen tide under a heavy moon. But by dawn, the waters receded, leaving fish flapping on doorsteps in eerie silence. In countryside hamlets, wildfires swept through dried grasslands in the height of summer. Come morning, the flames gone. The land lay covered in soft white ash that drifted like snowflakes, coating the silent remains of what had been. Humanity watched this turning of the seasons with a mix of awe and sorrow. There was a strange beauty in some of it. Sunsets painted in unheard-of colours by the veil of dust and smoke in the air, or the quiet of a windless, eerie winter day that felt like time suspended. But it was a beauty tainted by loss. Festivals that once celebrated the turning of the wheel of seasons became ceremonies of remembrance. People lit candles for winters that never came, for birds that no longer migrated overhead, for the steady old patterns that had guided their lives, and now were gone. By now, it was clear that the changing climate was not a temporary swing, but a new reality. The balance had tipped. Efforts were made to bring stability back, cloud seeding to call rain to arid lands, great walls built to hold back rising seas, reflective sails unfurled in the stratosphere to dim the ever fiercer sun. But these were small salves on a wound too vast to heal so swiftly. The Earth's system had momentum, and it rolled forward into a new era, indifferent to the pleas for the old rhythms to return. Through it all, life endured in adjusted forms. Some fields still yielded crops, though different from before. Some wild creatures adapted and found new patterns. A few even flourished in the changed world, filling niches left empty by others. Humanity, too, persisted, learning and hoping as each unrecognizable season passed. Under strange skies and a restless climate, people carried on, building, dreaming, and cherishing every calm day as a gift. But the delicate equilibrium of the past was gone, and all knew deep down that something fundamental had shifted beyond repair. The change in climate and land left more than just landscapes transformed. It also left them quieter. As conditions shifted beyond what many creatures could endure, a great silence crept over the earth. In the early morning, where once a chorus of birds greeted the dawn, now only a few lonely voices called out, and sometimes none at all. Forests that had pulsed with the croaks, chirps, and rustlings of countless beings grew still, the hush broken only by the sigh of wind through bare branches. One by one, species that had been familiar parts of life's tapestry began to fade away. It happened gradually, often unnoticed, except in hindsight. A certain kind of butterfly that used to arrive each spring simply didn't return one year, and the blossoming meadows felt oddly empty without their fluttering dance. In the ponds and marshes, the nightly symphony of frogs became muted as each season fewer answered the moon's rise. Along tropical shores, vibrant coral reefs turned brittle and pale, and the colourful fish that once flashed among the corals were absent, leaving the waters strangely still and colourless. In fields and gardens, bees and other pollinators grew scarce. Fruit trees bore few blossoms as their tiny winged partners vanished. People would stroll through their villages and notice that the familiar buzz of insects on a summer day was gone, replaced by a sound they weren't used to hearing. The very absence of sound. A quiet that felt unsettling under the bright sun. Children, who had grown up chasing grasshoppers and crickets, found the air empty of those tiny, joyful leaps. Their parents watched with a pang, realizing that a simple, once common sight had become a rarity. The oceans, too, fell silent in their own way. Sailors crossing the high seas reported fewer pods of dolphins dancing in the boat wakes. The great whales still sang their long, haunting songs across the deep, but their voices were lonelier. Where once other songs would answer over miles of ocean, now an eerie quiet followed their calls. On remote islands, the nesting grounds of seabirds lay deserted, the birds having failed to return, leaving only the wind and waves to converse over the sands. In distant savannas that once trembled with the footsteps of countless herds, an eerie stillness now reigned under the high sun. The far-carrying roar of lions became a memory told in stories rather than a sound that stirred the night. In the icebound north, great white bears paced the thinning ice in vain, their silent journeys eventually ceasing as the ice and their numbers faded. Creatures large and small, from tropical jungles to alpine peaks, quietly vanished from the tapestry of life, one after another. Everywhere, the living web of Earth unravelled thread by thread. It wasn't a sudden drama, but a gentle slipping away. Often, only those paying close attention realized what was happening. Scientists in far-off labs carefully noted the decline in numbers, the dwindling flocks, the shrinking herds. But these graphs and reports felt abstract to most. On the ground, the world simply grew quieter, as if holding its breath. For those who did notice, the loss was heartbreaking, in a profound, quiet way. Elders would tell stories of how things used to be, nights when the trees were alive with the glow of fireflies, or river journeys where turtles and birds crowded the banks in abundance. Listeners would nod and smile at the tales, but also glance out the window at the still darkness and feel a deep ache, knowing those sights and sounds might never grace the world again. Yet the silence was not complete. Life, though diminished, still persisted. Resilient grasses took root in fields where forests had burnt away, and a few adaptable creatures thrived in the new emptiness, filling the gaps as best they could. Humans, for their part, learned to cherish any encounter with the wild. A single bird's song at dusk, or a rare butterfly alighting on a lone wildflower, became precious gifts. In the quiet that settled over the planet, people listened more closely than ever, for any remaining heartbeat of the world, and for the faint echoes of the vibrant living song that once was. At a lonely launch field on Earth, the final exodus began. In the chill before sunrise, the chosen travelers stood in their flight suits and took one last look at the skies from the ground of their birth. The smell of dew on dry grass and the sound of a distant bird calling imprinted itself in their memories. Those few loved ones and colleagues who remained behind offered soft farewells, a last embrace, a photograph pressed into a palm, a whispered, safe journey through held-back tears. When the rockets ignited, a thunder rolled across the plain. As the ship rose on pillars of flame, those watching below shielded their eyes and followed its ascent until it vanished into the pale morning sky. Inside the ascending craft, the crew felt a surge of both grief and determination. The vibration of launch was fierce, but they held each other in steady gazes and silent resolve. Gravity's pull fell away moment by moment, and with it the weight of the world. In a matter of minutes, they left behind the only home they had ever known, entering a realm of endless night and stars. High above the Earth, beyond the thinning veil of atmosphere, a small group of travellers gathered by a window in silence. Out before them hung the planet that had been their home, a luminous blue marble floating in the dark. They had seen this sight before in training and pictures, but never like this, never as their last glimpse of Earth. Through the viewport, the curve of the globe was dazzling, painted with swirls of white clouds and the deep blue of endless ocean. The sight was as breathtaking as ever, stirring a profound love and longing. At first glance, Earth looked peaceful and unchanged, a tender jewel of life spinning in the void. The sun crept over the horizon of the planet, igniting a gentle glow along the edge of the atmosphere. That fragile halo of air, so thin from up here, shone like a delicate ribbon of turquoise and gold. Night retreated from one hemisphere as dawn spread slowly over forests, mountains, and seas below. The terminator line, between night and day, revealed city lights just flickering off and the first light of morning touching familiar coastlines. But these astronauts knew the truth of what lay beneath those clouds and blue oceans. They could see hints even from space. Where once polar caps gleamed brilliantly white, now they were shrunken patches, mere ghosts of their former selves. Brown and ochre tones marked expanding deserts at the edges of continents. Great swathes of forest that once carpeted the land had faded, some gone to grey or brown where life had thinned. Over one ocean, a massive spiral of clouds indicated another of the great storms that now raked the planet with increasing fury. Still, in this final view, Earth was achingly beautiful. One of the travellers pressed a hand to the glass, as if trying to touch the image of home one more time. In the quiet of the spacecraft, a few soft breaths and the hum of the air systems were the only sounds, as each person privately said their silent farewells. Memories flooded their minds of green fields and rain on a roof, of laughter in sunlit city streets, of family, friends, and every mundane and precious detail of life on the world now receding below them. They were not leaving in haste or panic now, but with a heavy, solemn resolve. This departure had been long planned, hoped for, and dreaded all at once, as the engines occasionally whispered adjustments and the ship gently floated farther from Earth. The gravity of the moment settled in their chests. Some shed tears that drifted free in the weightlessness before being brushed aside. Others closed their eyes as if in prayer or deep reflection, imprinting the sight of their waning planet indelibly in their hearts. Outside the window, the Earth slowly grew smaller. The continent shapes became indistinct, the blues and whites blending into a single sphere of light and colour. The ship's trajectory carried them toward the shadowed side, and for a while the planet was half in daylight, half in night. A silent transition of glowing hues to the darkness of night, sprinkled with the delicate sparkle of city lights. It was a gentle reminder of how alive that world still was in its own way, even as it changed. A radio crackle from the surface, a farewell message from those left behind, a familiar voice offering one last blessing for a safe journey, briefly echoed in their cabin, and then all went quiet once more. Finally, Earth was just a bright orb behind them against the starry backdrop. The time had come to look forward. With one last long look, the travellers turned away from the window. Before them, the infinite expanse of space awaited, filled with unknown stars and the promise of a new horizon. Carrying the legacy of a fading world in their minds and hearts, they set their course toward whatever haven might lie out among the stars, leaving the beautiful blue marble of their birth steadily shrinking in the distance. Not long after, the spacecraft and its companions, a small fleet carrying humanity's hopes, began the long journey away from the only home they had ever known. Earth lingered in their view for a while, a bright beacon growing smaller with each passing hour. The moon, too, slid silently past beneath them, its cratered face pale and distant. For a moment, the travellers gazed at that familiar companion of Earth, remembering nights under its gentle glow. Soon it was behind them as well, left orbiting the empty world they had departed. Inside the ship, time seemed suspended in the quiet hum of machinery and the soft routine of daily tasks. The travellers spoke little in those first hours and days, each lost in reflection. They moved slowly through the corridors, getting used to the weightlessness and the reality of what lay ahead. Through observation windows, they watched as the sun grew smaller and the stars grew brighter against the velvet black of space. The further they went, the more the sun, once a life-giving golden disk in Earth's sky, shrank to a brilliant white point, just another star among countless others. As the ship pushed onward, guided by the steady thrust of its engines, they passed by wonders of the solar system in a solemn procession. Mars glimmered rust-red in the distance off the starboard side one day, a lonely desert world that had once tantalized explorers as a potential second home. The passengers peered at it thoughtfully, but their path did not lead there. They were bound much farther afield. Later, the massive shape of Jupiter came into view, its swirling clouds and great red spot faintly discernible even from afar. The ship adjusted its course using the giant planet's gravity, a silent cosmic slingshot that flung them onward. For a brief time, Jupiter's presence filled the windows, a striped globe hanging against the black, its 4 bright moons pinpoints of light in attendance. Then it too was left behind. Days turned into weeks as they continued outward. Saturn's rings sparkled like a delicate necklace when the spacecraft coasted past at a respectful distance. In the observation dome, a few awestruck whispers were exchanged as the travellers beheld the ethereal bands of ice and rock encircling the distant planet. The sunlight out here was faint, casting a gentle twilight glow on Saturn's clouds. It was a sight of rare beauty, and for a moment, their mission felt like a voyage through the galleries of the gods, each planet a timeless work of art they were privileged to witness on their way. Beyond the outer planets, the spacecraft left the last familiar outposts of the solar system. They slipped past the orbit of Neptune, where the sun was no more than a pale star behind them. Here in the outer dark, a thin halo of comets and cosmic dust marked the edge of Earth's neighborhood. One by one, the remaining traces of home fell away. The last gravitational tugs of the sun weakened, the cosmic rays intensified, and an infinite ocean of stars lay ahead. In the quiet of the ship's bridge, the captain, a steady, thoughtful soul, announced to all on board that humanity was now truly interstellar. A gentle shiver ran through the crew at those words. They gathered once more by the viewing ports to see, for the last time, the sun of their youth shining far behind. It winked at them through a field of other stars, barely distinguishable now from the countless lights of the galaxy. Some pressed their palms together in a silent gesture of farewell and thanks for the warmth that had birthed them. Then they turned to face forward, toward the darkness between the stars and the new sun that waited light years beyond. Before surrendering themselves to the long sleep, the crew spent one last wakeful evening together. In the gentle artificial dusk of the ship's galley, they shared a simple meal and spoke softly of what might await beyond the stars. A few offered quiet toasts with cups of recycled water, raised as if it were fine wine, honouring the earth they left behind and the hope of the journey to come. They played a recording sent from Earth just before their departure, a collage of familiar voices wishing them well, a child's laughter, the strains of an old folk song, the solemn blessing from a wise elder. These sounds of home echoed through the cabin, drawing smiles and tears in equal measure. In that moment, the travellers felt the presence of all those they had left behind, guiding and comforting them. When the recording ended, they sat together in a hushed companionship, watching stars drift slowly past the windows, each person silently making peace with the past and embracing the uncertainty of the future. As the ship prepared to enter the long cruise phase of the journey, the travellers made their final arrangements. The vessel was built for this extended odyssey, self-sustaining, carrying gardens and libraries of human knowledge, and equipped with cryonic chambers for long sleep. The time had come to rest and let the ship carry them onward through the emptiness. One by one, they retreated into a special chamber where translucent pods awaited like rounded cocoons. Each person took a last look at their crewmates, sharing faint, hopeful smiles and words of reassurance in hushed tones. In the medical glow of soft lights, they settled into their pods. Warmth and a gentle haze enveloped each traveller as the systems initiated the deep sleep sequence. Heartbeats and breathing slowed. Eyelids grew heavy. One woman whispered a final goodbye into a small recorder, a message to any distant future who might find it, then closed her eyes with a tear of both sorrow and hope clinging to her lashes. A young man clutched a pendant from his grandmother as he exhaled and allowed the drugs to lull him into dreams. Within minutes, all were asleep, their faces peaceful, appearing almost like children lost in slumber. The ship continued on autopilot, its human passengers now resting in timeless sleep. Lights dimmed across the corridors to conserve energy, leaving the craft in a state of night. Outside, the stars shone indifferent and eternal. Now and then, the vessel adjusted its course with a gentle burst of thrusters, gliding ever further from the fading light of the sun, diving into the interstellar night. Within the pods, the travellers drifted far beyond conscious thought, carrying their memories and yearnings into a long and quiet darkness. Through the long, quiet night of their voyage, dreams blossomed in the sleepers' minds like flowers beneath moonlight. In the stillness of the ship, their conscious thoughts had slipped away, but the subconscious wove tapestries of memory and hope. They dreamed of Earth first, as it had been in its days of glory. One traveller found herself walking through a sunlit meadow that she knew from childhood. Golden grasses swayed in a warm breeze, and overhead the sky was the pure, brilliant blue of a spring long past. She could hear the distant laughter of friends and the bark of a dog running joyfully at the edge of the field. Wildflowers dotted the grass, daisies and bright poppies, and as she knelt to touch one, it felt so real that a tear of gratitude welled in her sleeping eyes aboard the ship. Another dreamed he stood in a great forest at dusk. Tall pines and ancient oaks rose around him, their branches gently stirring with the movements of unseen birds and small creatures. Sunlight lanced through the canopy in shafts of gold, illuminating motes of dust that danced like tiny stars in the air. He could smell pine resin and damp moss, and somewhere nearby a stream murmured over stones. In his dream he breathed deeply, filling his lungs with that rich, earthy air, feeling the living pulse of the woods as if it were his own heartbeat. Others wandered along the shore of a beloved ocean. In those dreams, the waves rolled in with a soothing roar and retreated with a whisper, leaving intricate lace patterns in the wet sand. The scent of salt and seaweed mingled with the cry of distant gulls. The sun hung low and red on the horizon, painting a shimmering path across the water. dreaming faces tilted toward the last light of an imagined sunset, absorbing the warmth and the moment of peace. Yet another traveller wandered through the streets of his hometown in his dream. The city was peaceful and empty, bathed in the blue glow of early evening. Streetlights flickered on one by one as he strolled past familiar cafes and quiet parks. There was no traffic, no bustle, only the soft echo of his footsteps. As he turned a corner, he noticed vines of starlight creeping up the sides of the buildings. The skyline began to transform. The shapes of the buildings grew strange and new, spires twisting toward unfamiliar constellations above. 2 moons rose above the silhouette of the changing city. In the dream, he felt no fear, only wonder. The city he knew was becoming something else, perhaps a place that did not yet exist, a future settlement waiting to be built under alien skies. He continued walking, heart calm and hopeful, sensing that one day those silent streets would be filled with life and laughter again. But as dreams do, these visions began to shift and transform. The meadow walker found the sky above her changing, the familiar blue deepening into a twilight indigo. When she looked up, the stars were not the same as those over Earth. They were denser, stranger, new constellations forming a glittering tapestry. The air in the dream meadow took on a cooler hint, a suggestion that she was not in the past at all anymore, but somewhere beyond it. The wildflowers glowed faintly, as if catching starlight in their petals. In her sleep, she smiled softly, sensing that this was a glimpse of something yet to come. The man in the forest watched as night fell, but it was not a fearful darkness. The trees around him began to change subtly, their leaves a different shape, their bark unfamiliar. Bioluminescent blossoms, unlike any on Earth, unfurled along the forest floor, casting a gentle luminescence like fallen stars. Creatures moved in the underbrush, but their footfalls made no sound. He stepped forward, and the ground felt soft and welcoming beneath his feet. A translucent moon rose above the alien woods, larger than Earth's moon, bathing the forest in pearlescent light. In his pod, his closed eyes moved beneath the lids, as if following the path of that moon. Those by the ocean dreamt that the ocean itself became a cosmic sea. The line between water and sky blurred until the stars were reflected perfectly on the surface, and it was as if they floated in space itself. One woman reached down to touch the water and saw it ripple with stars, each ripple expanding out into the universe. The red setting sun transformed into another star entirely, rising instead of setting, with a dawn-like glow of silver blue that painted the dream ocean in new colours. It was as though the Earth's ocean was turning into the sky of another world. In their interconnected dreams, the travellers felt the gentle presence of Earth, watching over them like a guardian through the journey of the night. Some dreamed of beloved faces, family and friends left behind or long gone, appearing by their side to comfort them. A grandmother's warm hand on a cheek, a child's laughter echoing down a sunlit street. Those fleeting encounters reassured the sleepers that they carried the love of their past into the future. These figures smiled and pointed onward, as if to say, "Go forward, all will be well." It felt as if the planet itself were offering comfort and a quiet blessing, bidding them farewell with these memories and gently urging them onward. Throughout these visions, there was a sense of both goodbye and hello, entwined like twin vines. The essence of Earth, its beauty, its life, its memory. intertwined with images of a strange new land that might await them. Mountains under unfamiliar stars, fields of grass that glowed gently at midnight, skies with twin moons, or rings shimmering at twilight. These scenes flickered through their collective dreams, leaving impressions of wonder rather than fear. As decades slipped by outside their minds, the sleepers remained cradled in these comforting reveries. In the solitude of deep space, time had lost meaning, but their dreams wove past and future into one timeless tapestry. Earth's voice seemed to whisper in their ears, telling them they were not alone out here, that they carried its story onward. And amidst the farewell scenes were welcomes from the universe ahead, hints and promises that somewhere a place of new beginnings was ready and waiting for them. In that long dreaming time, each traveller found a measure of peace. Sorrows were acknowledged and gently released like petals onto a stream. Hopes were nurtured like embers kept aglow through a cold night. They slept and they dreamed, held safely by their vessel and by the lingering echo of the world they had left behind, all while drifting steadily closer to the world they had yet to find. A soft chime began to echo through the dim silence of the ship, a gentle sequence of notes that gradually roused the sleeping crew from their long slumber. The automatic systems had detected their approach to the destination, and now it was time for the travellers to wake. Inside each pod, warm light slowly brightened, simulating a dawn. The frozen suspension that had held them for so many years eased, and heartbeats quickened toward a normal rhythm. One by one, the crew members stirred, eyes fluttering open as if from a deep and distant dream. At first, there was confusion, a moment of weightless disorientation, as minds that had been adrift in timeless sleep reconnected with reality. But soon, memory returned. The mission, the voyage, the hope that lay ahead. They smiled weakly at one another as pod hatches opened, offering helping hands as each person found their footing. Their bodies were sore and slow, but alive, wonderfully alive and awake after so long. In hushed voices, they exchanged greetings that felt both new and familiar, as if meeting old friends after a lifetime apart. As they gradually recovered their strength, the crew made their way to the observation deck, drawn by an unspoken eagerness. The view that greeted them there stole the breath from their lungs. Dominating the expanse of star-sprinkled blackness was a bright new star, the sun of another world, shining golden white and welcoming. It was larger in their view now than any star had been in a very long time, its light flooding the cabin with a gentle dawn-like glow. They had arrived at the threshold of their new home system. Just beyond that star, coming into focus as the ship glided forward, was a planet, their destination, the hoped-for refuge promised by distant telescopes long ago. At first, it was just a crescent of light against darkness, but as they drew nearer, its form emerged in full. Gasps and quiet exclamations of joy filled the deck. Before their eyes was a vibrant, swirling sphere, not unlike the one they had left, yet distinctly different and new. Swathes of white clouds moved above patches of green and brown land, and vast oceans of deep blue. Along the planet's terminator, the line between day and night, they could see the twinkle of lightning in a far-off storm cloud, and the faint glow of an aurora near a pole, evidence of a protective magnetic field like Earth's. Tears gathered in more than one pair of eyes at this sight of a living world. For so long, they had travelled with the image of a dying Earth in their hearts, daring to imagine a place where humanity could begin again. Now here it was, real and shining below them. Instruments confirmed what their eyes already felt: a breathable atmosphere rich with oxygen, vast continents and liquid seas, temperatures that suggested verdant life could indeed flourish. The planet, their new Earth, some would later call it, was not just habitable in theory, it was alive. Perhaps not with cities or people, but with its own wild beauty. It felt like a gift waiting to be unwrapped. They drifted into orbit around this new haven, allowing themselves time to observe and prepare. Through every window, lush vistas unfolded: great emerald forests carpeting continents, silver ribbons of rivers glinting in sunlight, and at the terminator, the twinkle of stars reflecting on calm nighttime seas. They saw a chain of islands dotting a turquoise ocean, and imagined future generations playing on those sunlit shores. They traced the curl of a massive hurricane far to the southern hemisphere, powerful yet oddly majestic when viewed from above, its spiral arms casting shadows on the clouds beneath. Everything they witnessed spoke of a world vibrant and dynamic, yet peaceful from their lofty perch. Messages were exchanged with the other ships in their fleet, as they too arrived one by one in orbit. Soft cheers and words of congratulations travelled over the radio, the relief and happiness evident even in those controlled voices. In each vessel, small groups of survivors looked down with the same mix of awe and gratitude. Humanity had travelled across the abyss and found a new home waiting. The silent vacuum of space was now filled with the quiet sobs of joy and laughter of those who had endured so much to reach this point. On the main ship, the captain's voice quietly broke through the reverent hush. "We have arrived," she said, barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the moment. No one responded with words, but in the golden light of the new sun, their smiles spoke volumes. Some embraced gently, others simply stood side by side in wonder, eyes shining. There was work to be done, scans to complete, landing sites to choose. But for now, they allowed themselves this precious time to bask in fulfillment. After all the eons spent in darkness and the years of uncertainty, here at last was the reward shining below them. In that moment, as their ship soared above a new world's dawn, every sacrifice and every longing seemed worth it. A new chapter in humanity's story was about to begin. A few hours before their arrival, the ship's AI gently roused the captain and a few key crew members from stasis. They awoke groggily to find a bright star dominating the view screens, the sun of their destination, shining like a warm beacon through the darkness. Suppressing a swell of joy, they ran careful system checks and guided the ship's final approach. All was in order. With a trembling breath, the captain prepared to awaken the others. It was time. At last, the time came to set foot on their new world. After careful preparation and countless glances at the green and blue sphere below, a small landing shuttle detached from the main ship and began its descent. The crew had selected a broad, welcoming plain near the edge of a tranquil sea, where the climate seemed mild and the seasons gentle. As the shuttle slipped into the atmosphere, it was greeted by soft, white clouds, which parted as if to grant them passage. A golden morning was underway below, with mist gently rising off the coastline as the new sun climbed the sky. Inside the shuttle, the passengers felt a slight tug of gravity returning, a familiar weight after so long adrift. There was no jarring turbulence, only a gradual warmth and a faint rush of air across the hull as they glided downwards. Through the viewport, they watched a landscape unfurl. Rolling hills cloaked in vegetation, perhaps a kind of grass or low forest, stretching toward distant mountains. The ocean beyond gleamed with a serene aqua hue, its shoreline curving gracefully along the continent. Everything was touched with the fresh light of dawn. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thump on a field of soft, amber-coloured grass-like plants. For a moment, no one moved. Heartbeats thundered in chests, and eyes filled with tears of relief and joy. Then, slowly, the hatch was opened. A ramp extended to the ground, and a waft of air entered, alien yet sweet, carrying a subtle fragrance of unknown blooms and earth. The explorers donned light breathing masks for caution and stepped outside, one by one, onto the soil of their new home. The first to emerge was the captain, who paused at the foot of the ramp and placed a trembling hand on the ground. The soil was cool and slightly damp with morning dew. Even through her glove, she felt the reality of it. Solid ground, new earth beneath her fingers. Overcome with emotion, she removed her glove and pressed her palm directly against the damp soil and tiny plants, letting the dirt cling to her skin. It was real. Behind her, the others quietly followed, some falling to their knees to touch the ground, others turning their faces up to the gentle sunlight of a sky that was not Earth's, yet was now theirs. A breeze tousled their hair, a real wind under an open sky. With careful movements, they unlatched their helmets and inhaled tentatively. The air was rich and breathable, filled with the green scent of leaves and a faint salty hint of the nearby sea. It tasted of life. Laughter bubbled up from the group, spontaneous and light, as they shed the last barriers between themselves and this world. They breathed deeply, filling their lungs with clean, cool air that carried no trace of smoke or pollution, only the promise of untamed nature. All around them, the landscape beckoned. Stands of strange trees with long, willowy branches swayed gently at the edge of the plain. Delicate flowers in colours never seen on earth peeped through the golden grasses. In the distance, something like a herd of small, deer-like creatures grazed, lifting their heads in mild curiosity at the new arrivals before bounding away with springy leaps. Overhead, a flock of winged beings soared, their calls faint and musical, like chimes echoing across the morning air. Every sight and sound confirmed that this world was vibrant and alive, a place where they could truly belong. The humans moved slowly, reverently, as if afraid to disturb the sacred tranquility of this place. One of the scientists knelt and unsealed a small container she had carried from Earth. From it, she withdrew a young sapling, a tiny oak tree, carefully preserved during the journey. With tender hands, she found a spot near the landing site and began to dig a little hole in the soft loam. Others gathered around in silence. She placed the sapling into the ground and patted the earth around its roots. It was an oak descended from a great tree that once grew in the old world. Now it would take root here, a living bridge between Earth and this new land. They took turns pouring a bit of water at its base, and then stood back, watching its small green leaves flutter in the alien breeze. It was a quiet promise that they would honour the memory of Earth and cultivate life here with care and hope. As the sun climbed higher, the settlers set up a simple camp. A few tents and shelters emerged from their supplies, and devices began humming to life, converting sunlight into energy. Yet, even amid this flurry of work, they took moments to simply soak in the environment. 2 crew members walked to a nearby hill to gaze at the sea, their silhouettes small against the vast blue water and the sky beyond. Another sat at the base of the newly planted oak sapling, recording thoughts in a journal, while birds, or creatures much like birds, fluttered in the canopy of the strange trees nearby. When evening approached, the sky bloomed with hues of lavender and gold. The New World sunset was as breathtaking as any they remembered on Earth, casting long shadows and illuminating the clouds in soft pink light. The 2 moons of this planet, for it had twin moons, became visible as silvery crescents, rising one after the other. As darkness gently fell, the crew gathered around a small, crackling fire built from dried driftwood collected on the beach. They shared a modest meal and stories, voices low and filled with wonder. The flames danced in their eyes as they talked about what tomorrow might bring. The explorations, the building of a settlement, the learning of this world's ways. There was excitement, but no rush. Tonight was for Thanksgiving and remembrance. They fell into a comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead. The constellations were unfamiliar, yet beautiful, an intricate spray of light across an endless firmament. Somewhere among those countless stars was a tiny sun that had been their first home star, though none could pinpoint it with certainty. Still, they gazed upward with a sense of connection. The distance did not sever the bonds of memory or love. In a low voice, one person began to hum an old lullaby, a song passed down through generations on Earth. One by one, others joined in softly. The gentle melody mingled with the whisper of the ocean and the night breeze, carrying their love and longing for Earth into the vast night, and at the same time welcoming the new world into their hearts. Tired from emotion and the day's labours, they finally retired to their tents and sleeping rolls beneath the open sky. For the first time in ages, they slept under the stars, not as travellers in a metal hull, but as people of a planet, sheltered by atmosphere and the rhythms of a living world. The captain remained awake a few moments longer, standing at the edge of the camp. She looked out over the dim silhouette of the land and the glint of starlight on gentle waves. In that quiet moment, she thought of Earth, not with despair, but with gratitude and peace. "We made it," she whispered, as if speaking to the millions of souls who had dreamed of this moment, past and present. A sense of calm fulfillment washed over her. Eventually, she too lay down to rest on the soft ground. The night air was cool and filled with the soft chorus of alien crickets, or their equivalent, lulling the crew to sleep. Above, the twin moons cast a faint silver light across the sleeping figures and their vessel, as if standing guard. The new soil was warm beneath them, and the scent of new blossoms drifted through the air. As she closed her eyes, the captain listened to her own breathing and to the gentle sounds of this generous world. She felt, in that instant, the echo of Earth in her heart and the heartbeat of this planet beneath her, separate, yet somehow in harmony. A small smile graced her lips. The journey was over, and a new journey was beginning. In the cradle of a new dawn's promise, humanity had found not just an escape, but a continuation. Carried by the hope from a dying planet, they had come to a place where that hope could flourish anew. Under strange constellations and the watchful glow of unfamiliar moons, the last children of Earth drifted into peaceful sleep. Their breathing fell into sync with the gentle night breeze, rising and falling in a quiet lullaby of life. The stars shimmered above, the ocean whispered against the shore, and the new world carried on its nocturne, cradling its newest inhabitants in a deep and restful slumber. And as they slept, the universe kept its silent watch, bearing witness to this humble and extraordinary new beginning. In that gentle darkness, it felt as though the universe itself breathed in tandem with them, a vast and compassionate presence embracing their slumber. In the twilight of an era, a realization began to settle over humanity like a slow, inevitable dawn. The signs had been gathering for decades, whispered first by isolated researchers, and then shouted by an overwhelming scientific consensus. One by one, the vital organs of our planet were failing. Forests withered into ashen plains, oceans turned acidic and lifeless. Ice caps that had crowned the poles for millennia melted into the sea. Each new report was more dire than the last, and each passing year made the truth harder to ignore. Humanity stood at the edge of a precipice, peering into a future it was finally ready to admit was real. For years, the evidence mounted in broken records and calamitous events. There were summers when heat waves turned fertile plains to dust, and winters that never came to places once blanketed in snow. The Amazon rainforest, the planet's green lung, had begun to wither and even emit more carbon than it absorbed. In the far north, Arctic ice that had glittered year-round dwindled to nothing each summer, leaving dark, open waters that drank in the sun's heat. Coastal cities flooded with each high tide, salt water creeping into streets that had stood dry for centuries. Crops failed in successive droughts, and millions of people were displaced, becoming wanderers in search of livable land. In jungles and forests, creatures great and small vanished at an alarming rate, leaving behind an eerie silence where vibrant life once thrived. Through it all, many clung to the hope that these were temporary extremes or problems technology could solve. But hope eroded as one ecosystem after another reached its breaking point, and nature's balance unraveled before our eyes. For many, the breaking point arrived in a single, harrowing year when multiple catastrophes struck in unison. A heat wave of unprecedented ferocity settled over several continents and claimed tens of thousands of lives. Halfway across the world, a megastorm leveled coastal regions that had never before seen such fury. That same year, an ice shelf the size of a country collapsed into the ocean with a thunderous roar, accelerating sea level rise in an instant. Even the deep ocean offered no refuge, as vast stretches of coral reef succumbed to warming waters, leaving behind underwater graveyards where vibrant life had once flourished. By the year's end, it was clear to all that these were not isolated disasters, but threads of a single unravelling tapestry. The calls for a definitive reckoning, a clear statement of humanity's predicament, grew impossible to ignore. Humanity was finally ready, perhaps for the first time, to face the unvarnished truth. By this point, even the voices of denial and doubt had faded. Politicians and pundits who once dismissed the warnings as alarmist now found themselves speechless before the onslaught of obvious change. What had been a contentious debate for years abruptly transformed into a somber acceptance. There was no denying the truth. The world was hurtling down a path that could not be easily reversed. The turning point came quietly at first, in the form of an extraordinary scientific declaration broadcast around the world. Thousands of scientists from every nation had signed their names to a final warning, a document stating in plain and irrevocable terms that Earth's decline could no longer be halted or reversed within any meaningful time frame. For the first time in history, the scientific community spoke not of prevention or mitigation, but of acceptance and survival. When this message reached the public, carried on every screen, every radio wave. A hushed silence fell across cities and villages alike. People paused in their daily routines, absorbing the collective truth that our planet, our only home, was slipping beyond our grasp. In that global moment of reckoning, the reaction was a quiet, collective heartbreak. Some people cried openly in the streets, while others stood numb and uncertain, holding the hands of their children or the arms of their neighbours. There was anger too, but it was a distant thunder, muted by the overwhelming weight of reality setting in. In living rooms and public squares, strangers embraced or offered gentle words of comfort, forging an unspoken bond in the face of this shared fate. Under the pall of heavy skies and crimson sunsets, humanity grieved for its wounded world. And in that sorrow, a fragile resolve began to form. In the days that followed, humanity collectively paused to mourn and to hope. Cities dimmed their lights for a night, so that one last time people might look up and see the stars above their ailing planet. In churches, mosques, temples, and open fields, prayers were offered and candles lit in quiet vigil for the earth. Artists sang haunting laments on behalf of the forests and seas, their voices carried on global broadcasts that millions listened to in silence. Amid the sorrow, there was a strange unity in this shared pause, a realization that every person was, in that moment, bound together by the same uncertainty and longing for guidance. It was as if the world took one deep, collective breath, preparing itself for whatever came next. In the wake of that grim consensus, the world's attention turned from asking why to demanding what now. Calls for action echoed from all corners of the globe, from scientists urging immediate adaptation plans, from citizens pleading for guidance, and from elders reminding everyone of humanity's resilience. Within days, leaders from every nation agreed to meet in emergency session, setting aside old quarrels in recognition of an existential threat greater than any border or ideology. They converged, not as competitors, but as wary partners, intent on forging a plan for survival. Out of this gathering, an idea took shape, the seeds of a united council to guide humanity through the dark chapter ahead. They came together in a hall unlike any other, delegates and leaders from every corner of the globe seated side by side. In the weeks after the scientific proclamation of Earth's decline, an unprecedented assembly convened under a banner of human unity. For the first time, national flags and anthems were set aside in favour of a single emblem, the image of Earth, pale blue and fragile, displayed above the meeting floor as a reminder of what was at stake. There was little of the usual ceremony or pomp. Instead, a solemn determination filled the air. Presidents, prime ministers, scientists, and generals all listened as one another spoke in turn, candidly, gravely, and with an urgency never heard in ordinary diplomatic gatherings. What began as an emergency session soon became a standing body, one with a singular purpose. Thus, the Council of Worlds was born, a council not of nations, but of a species, tasked with nothing less than ensuring humanity's future. For many around the world, this unprecedented unity offered a glimmer of hope amid the darkness, proof that humanity could come together when it mattered most. The Council's first order of business was to understand just how narrow the horizon of Earth's future had become. Leading climatologists, ecologists, and engineers presented their findings in stark detail. Their models showed that within a single generation, many of the world's most populated regions would become virtually uninhabitable due to extreme heat, drought, and rising seas. Even if drastic measures were taken to curb the damage, the planet's recovery would be glacial, likely requiring centuries or millennia before a semblance of the old balance returned. Species that disappeared would not re-evolve. Ice sheets that melted would not reform in our lifetime. The implications were unthinkable. Without an extraordinary intervention, the Earth would no longer comfortably support the billions of lives upon it. As these projections flashed before the assembly, a heavy silence fell. Every person in that chamber understood that they were staring at a future in which the world as they knew it would cease to exist. From the outset, the Council faced the monumental task of turning solidarity into action. One of its first acts was to declare that knowledge and resources critical to survival would be shared openly. Technologies that had once been guarded as national secrets, advanced energy systems, agricultural innovations, spaceflight research, were put on a common table for all. For once, geopolitical competition gave way to a shared sense of destiny, fragile but unmistakable. In war-torn regions, ceasefires quietly took hold. Armies that had battled each other only months before found themselves delivering food aid or helping to build flood defenses side by side. The realization dawned that on a dying planet, old rivalries had become a luxury no one could afford. Even as mistrust lingered in some hearts, the necessity of cooperation forged new alliances that would have been unthinkable just a generation earlier. Beneath the newfound solidarity, practical challenges spurred hard negotiations. The Council had to decide how to marshal the planet's remaining resources for the monumental tasks ahead. Wealthy nations pledged funding and technology, while poorer nations insisted on guarantees that their populations would not be forgotten in the Exodus plans. In closed-door meetings, haggling ensued over quotas, contributions, and leadership roles. Yet every delegate knew that clinging to national self-interest was a dead end now. One by one, they compromised. A few of the richest countries agreed to devote unprecedented portions of their economies to a global survival project. And in return, plans were made to ensure representation and spots for all regions in whatever future was to come. These difficult conversations, though tense at times, ultimately strengthened the Council's resolve. It became clear that saving humanity would require sacrifices and concessions from everyone. And one way or another, everyone would have to share in both the burden and the hope. Yet unity did not erase all disagreements. Early on, a heated exchange laid bare the tensions beneath the surface. When one delegation proposed beginning serious preparations for a possible exodus from Earth, the construction of massive ships to carry humanity to new worlds, not everyone was ready to embrace the notion. A few leaders balked, arguing that abandoning Earth was unthinkable when billions of people were still clinging to life across the continents. Anxious voices echoed through the chamber. Was it too soon to speak of leaving? Was it a betrayal of those struggling to save what remained? In response, proponents of the Exodus plan spoke with urgency, pointing to the scientific reports and the narrow window of time remaining. They argued that without bold action, there would soon be no safe harbour left anywhere on the planet, and planning for humanity's escape was not an abandonment of hope, but its continuation by other means. The debate was passionate but measured, each side compelled by the same desperate love for their home and their people, yet drawn to different visions of salvation. Day by day, the Council toiled to maintain stability and hope in a world on the brink. But one monumental decision loomed over every discussion. More and more, conversations returned to a stark question. Should humanity devote its remaining strength to restoring Earth's balance, or prepare to leave the only home it had ever known? It was a dilemma with no easy answer, one that cut to the core of human identity and hope. Yet as conditions on the planet continued to deteriorate, the time to choose a path was drawing near. Humanity now stood at a crossroads that had once been unthinkable. With the reality of Earth's decline laid bare, the question that had lingered unspoken finally demanded an answer. In council chambers, in scientific institutes, and in ordinary homes, people asked themselves and each other what path to take. Was it still possible to heal the wounded Earth? Or was it time to look to the stars for salvation? On one side were those who fervently believed in restoring our home, no matter the odds. Environmental scientists, humanitarian leaders, and many who had dedicated their lives to protecting nature, urged the Council not to abandon the planet that had given humanity everything. They pointed out that Earth's biosphere had remarkable resilience if given a chance, and that there were still possibilities for recovery. Massive projects were proposed, reforesting entire continents, developing carbon capture machines to scrub the sky clean, and even ambitious geoengineering schemes to temporarily cool the atmosphere. Supporters of this path spoke of responsibility and love, a duty to heal the damage done, and a deep affection for the only world we've ever known. Their voices carried the pain of loss, but also a spark of hope that not all was irretrievably broken. One veteran ecologist recounted how a poisoned river in her youth had eventually run clear again when industry ceased dumping waste, a small example of nature's capacity to renew itself. Others reminded the Council of past triumphs, diseases eradicated, disasters overcome, urging that if humanity could achieve those feats, perhaps the planet could yet be healed with enough collective effort. Opposing them were voices advocating a bold leap into space. The camp that believed humanity's survival lay beyond the confines of Earth. This group comprised pioneering engineers, astronauts, futurists, and leaders from nations with advanced space programs, as well as countless ordinary people whose hopes had shifted to the stars. They argued that Earth, as beloved as it was, might soon become uninhabitable despite all efforts, and that clinging to it could doom humanity to extinction. Instead, they painted a vision of generation ships traveling to new worlds, of colonies beneath alien suns, where civilization could start anew. Telescopes, they noted, had already identified promising distant planets that might one day be homes for our descendants. To these advocates, preparing for an interstellar journey was not giving up on life. It was safeguarding it. They spoke of courageously embracing the unknown, much as early explorers had once sailed uncharted seas, carrying their society's hopes with them. Theirs was a message of determination and daring. Humanity had always been a species of explorers, and now was the time to make the greatest voyage of all. Inside the Council, the deliberations reached an impasse as each side pressed its case with earnest conviction. One delegate from a small island nation, whose lands were already being swallowed by the rising seas, pleaded for more time and effort to save what was left of Earth's ecosystems, fearing that her people would have nowhere to go if an exodus became reality. In response, a senior official from a spacefaring nation calmly recounted the latest climate projections, reminding the Assembly that in a few short decades, even basic crops might not grow in large parts of the world. How, he asked gently, would we feed those billions if we stayed? His words hung in the air, highlighting the painful truth that resources devoted to an interstellar escape might mean less aid for those suffering now. Yet failure to plan an escape could condemn all future generations. The council members sat in heavy silence after such exchanges, fully aware that whichever path they chose, countless lives hung in the balance, and history would judge them accordingly. Outside the chamber, millions around the world followed every update. Their hearts were heavy with uncertainty as they waited for a decision. Far beyond the meeting halls, families and friends grappled with the same questions in their own lives. For many, the debate was not abstract at all, but a matter of life and death. In a drought-stricken farming village, an old man looked out at his parched fields and declared he would rather spend his last days on Earth than flee to a strange new world. His granddaughter, listening quietly, imagined the opposite. She saw herself stepping aboard a great starship, heart pounding with fear and hope, determined to find a future for their family among the stars. Across the globe, similar conversations played out every day. Couples in cities argued over whether their children might one day live beneath an alien sky. In some towns, whole communities vowed to remain together on Earth no matter what came. Meanwhile, others quietly prepared for the possibility of saying goodbye to everything they knew. The fate of Earth was no longer an abstract policy issue. It had become a deeply personal reckoning for every person alive. Beyond politics, the existential choice stirred spiritual and philosophical reflection. Religious and community leaders around the globe grappled with what leaving Earth would mean. Some preached that humanity had a sacred duty to remain and steward the planet, that abandoning our home would be a betrayal of creation. Others, however, found guidance in ancient narratives, likening the proposed starships to Noah's Ark, a divine mandate to save life at any cost. Philosophers wrote essays on the ethics of forsaking one world for another, and whether human identity was tied to Earth or could flourish on distant shores. In the court of public opinion, no simple consensus emerged, but the depth of these discussions showed how profoundly the question had entered the human psyche. At last, after countless hours of debate and soul-searching, the outline of a decision began to take shape. Bit by bit, the grim consensus formed that humanity could not simply will Earth back to health in the time left. With deep reluctance, the Council leaned toward the only remaining hope, to seek humanity's future beyond Earth. They agreed that efforts to ease suffering and stabilize what they could on the home planet must continue, but the lion's share of resources and planning would shift toward an exodus. It was a somber resolution, met not with cheers, but with a quiet, determined resolve. Even as this choice solidified, it brought with it a host of new questions. If humanity was to depart its cradle, how exactly would it do so? Some spoke of finding refuge in fortified shelters on Earth to wait out the worst, while others insisted on building great starships to carry people away. The next challenge lay in deciding the means of survival, whether our last days on Earth would be spent in hidden bunkers, or our first days of exodus would begin aboard generation ships bound for the unknown. That debate would demand yet another fateful choice. Having chosen to seek survival beyond a dying surface, humanity now faced a new dilemma, whether to flee or to hide. The question of how loomed as large as whether. Would the human story continue aboard colossal starships, voyaging across the cosmos, or in fortified havens beneath Earth's scarred surface? In the Council and across the world, the debate shifted from if humanity should depart to how it could endure. The stark choice boiled down to two radically different strategies: setting sail for other worlds, or digging in to wait out the storm at home. Advocates of the shelter strategy argued for turning Earth's remaining sanctuaries into bastions of survival. They envisioned vast underground cities burrowed deep into bedrock or beneath mountains, modern arks where people could live through the worst ravages of climate collapse. In these fortified enclaves, humanity would carry the torch of civilization while the surface healed, however long that might take. Engineers described how nuclear reactors or geothermal energy could power these subterranean havens, and hydroponic farms could grow food beneath artificial suns. Supporters of this plan emphasized that it offered refuge to potentially millions of people, far more than any feasible space fleet could carry. To them, building shelters was a practical and inclusive choice. It meant that whole communities might endure together on their ancestral land, rather than seeing only a select few venture into space. There was comfort in the idea of staying on Earth's soil, even if it was far below ground, a sense that humanity wouldn't completely sever its roots to the planet that birthed it. They reminded their peers that throughout history, humans had weathered ice ages and cataclysms by seeking shelter. This, they argued, was simply a far larger scale echo of that survival instinct. On the other side, proponents of building generation ships urged humanity to look outward and act swiftly. They argued that no matter how deep our bunkers, they would eventually become tombs if the planet above remained lifeless for centuries. Only by leaving Earth, they said, could we ensure that our species and culture would survive in the long term. These visionaries sketched out plans for enormous interstellar vessels, self-contained worlds capable of sustaining life for many generations. Each ship would be a feat of engineering, equipped with rotating habitats to provide artificial gravity, recycling systems to renew air and water, and vast onboard greenhouses to feed its passengers. While only a relative few could journey on these arks, those few would carry the legacy of all humanity, a precious seed to be planted on distant soil. The ship advocates acknowledged the daunting uncertainties, the possibility of never finding a habitable world, the risks of living in space for lifetimes. But they believed humanity's innate spirit of exploration and adaptability would prevail. To them, remaining in shelters was merely prolonging the inevitable end, whereas a fleet of ships offered a chance, however slim, at a new beginning. As the plans took shape on paper, the philosophical divide grew sharper. A representative from one of the world's most populous regions spoke with barely contained anguish, questioning the morality of a plan that seemed to save only a chosen few. How could they tell their people, she asked, that most would be left beneath a dying sky, while a lucky handful sailed away to safety? In answer, an aerospace engineer leading the Starship design team responded not with callousness, but with a trembling earnestness. He reminded the council that if everyone remained on Earth, no one would survive in the end. The ships were a lifeboat, not an elitist luxury. The words hung heavily. No one in the chamber was blind to the ethical torment of the choice. Every option meant leaving souls behind, whether in sealed bunkers or on a doomed planet, and that grim reality drove many to tears, even as they argued. Still, the debate pressed on, balancing on a razor's edge between idealism and pragmatism. Outside the meeting rooms, humanity had already begun taking tentative steps down both paths. Deep underground, excavation machines were drilling test chambers to simulate life in a sealed shelter, and volunteers moved into these prototype bunkers for weeks at a time to troubleshoot the challenges of closed-loop living. In high orbit, the skeletal frame of a prototype Starship habitat was assembled, a glimmering work in progress where scientists experimented with artificial gravity and life support systems. These parallel efforts yielded sobering insights. Early reports from the underground trials described the psychological strain of living without sunlight and open sky, and the difficulty of growing enough food in cramped caverns. Meanwhile, the orbital habitat tests revealed how complex and fragile a self-contained world could be, Algae vats that produced oxygen sometimes crashed, and micro-ecosystems teetered on the brink until engineers adjusted them. The lessons were invaluable, underscoring that neither path would be easy or guaranteed. But they also proved that with ingenuity, both survival strategies were at least technically within reach, at a cost that could be measured in massive resources and unwavering commitment. In the end, pragmatism and the desire to keep humanity's flame alive tipped the balance. Gradually, more voices in the council began to favour the path of the stars. The turning point came when an elderly statesman, once a staunch advocate for staying, rose to speak in a voice trembling with emotion. Softly, he admitted that as much as it broke his heart to leave Earth behind, he would rather see his grandchildren wandering among the stars than trapped underground without end. "If we remain, we face certain doom," he said, gazing around the silent chamber. "If we venture outward, at least some part of us will live on." Those simple words crystallized what many had been feeling. One by one, delegates who had clung to the shelter vision bowed their heads and conceded the truth. Time would not wait for Earth's rebirth. The only real hope lay in a bold departure. With that, the council coalesced around a plan to construct a fleet of generation ships. They did not make the decision lightly. A parallel effort would continue to build and supply shelters as an interim measure and safety net for as many people as possible. But humanity's main thrust, its collective moonshot, would be aimed at the stars. The meeting room was filled not with celebration, but with a solemn resolve. There were tears and quiet prayers, embraces between rivals now united by fate. In that profound moment, the world's leaders prepared to commit to an audacious exodus, knowing it would forever change the course of history. All that remained was to put this great decision to a final, formal vote, a vote that would signal the point of no return. The day of the great vote arrived at last, under a leaden grey sky. Delegates gathered once more in the council's assembly hall, their faces drawn and reflective. Gone was the fervent debate. This morning, there was only a heavy, anticipatory silence. Around the world, billions of people fixed their attention on this singular moment. Crowds packed into public squares to listen to radio translations. Families huddled around flickering television sets, powered by generators in blackout-stricken cities. In makeshift refugee camps and high-tech metropolises alike, humanity held its breath as the final decision was about to be cast. Before the voting commenced, the council's chairperson stepped forward to address the chamber one last time. Her voice was calm, but resonated with emotion as it carried through the hall. She spoke of the long road that had led them here, the anguish, the debate, the unity forged in adversity. "Today," she said gently, "we stand at the threshold of history. Whatever we decide will echo for generations untold." Delegates nodded in solemn agreement. There were no further arguments to be made. Every angle had been dissected, every fear and hope laid bare. All that remained was to make the choice official. When the roll call began, a hush fell so deep that one could hear the faint hum of the air filtration system. Country by country, representative by representative, the votes were voiced. Argentina. "Yes," came the first clear answer. Australia. "Yes." Bangladesh. "Yes." One after another, in alphabetical order, each delegate declared their nation's will. Some spoke firmly, others almost in a whisper, overcome by the gravity of the moment. A few could be seen wiping their eyes as they said the word. As the procession of names continued, it became apparent that the decision was nearly unanimous. Not a single no was heard. A handful of delegations abstained, their silence born of internal turmoil or uncertainty, but no one openly opposed the resolution. At last, the final name was called and answered. The presiding officer looked out over the assembly, her eyes shining with tears she did not wipe away. "By an overwhelming majority," she announced, voice reverberating in the stillness, "the resolution passes." For a long, weightless moment, the hall remained quiet. It was as if no one dared to breathe, absorbing the enormity of what they had just done. Then, slowly, the delegates rose from their seats. Some exchanged gentle nods or reached across aisles to clasp hands. There was no applause, no cheers, only a profound, shared silence and the shuffling of papers as history was written in their records. In acknowledgement of what was lost and what lay ahead, the assembly observed a moment of silence. Heads bowed beneath the great dome of the chamber, as each person offered their private farewell to the earth they knew and a quiet benediction for the journey to come. Outside the building, the crowd of onlookers also fell silent as the news rippled out. A gentle wave of stillness circled the globe at that instant, uniting everyone in reflection. Thus did humanity mark the turning of an age in reverent quiet. In many places, neighbours and strangers alike embraced, not in celebration, but in solidarity. They comforted one another with the knowledge that at least a decision had been made. Some wept for the home they would leave behind. Others murmured cautious words of hope about the worlds that might await beyond the sky. Everywhere, there was an understanding that a new chapter of human history was beginning. Daunting, bittersweet, but necessary. That evening, as twilight fell across the world, humanity collectively exhaled. The great decision, as it would come to be known, had been made. While fear and sorrow lingered, there was also a glint of resolve in human hearts. The path was set. Now the species that had once only gazed at the stars would marshal all its ingenuity to reach them. The hardest choices were behind them, and the hardest work lay ahead. In the quiet that followed, one chapter of our story closed, and another began. The era of Exodus Earth. The day after the vote, humanity's work began anew with a singular focus. Plans that had been theoretical swiftly moved into implementation. Shipyards were commissioned to build the great arcs, and construction timetables were drawn up against the ticking clock of a deteriorating Earth. Scientists and engineers from every corner of the globe mobilized, pooling knowledge to solve the innumerable technical challenges. Ordinary people, too, steeled themselves for sacrifices, knowing that every resource and every effort must now feed into the mission of Exodus. The era of uncertainty had ended. Now came the era of action. With solemn determination, the human race turned its gaze from the waning light of its old home toward the faint, beckoning glow of new worlds yet to be found. In quiet laboratories and vast assembly hangars across a fading world, humanity's last hope begins to take shape. Engineers and dreamers pore over starship designs, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of holographic blueprints. There is a hush in these places, a reverence for the task at hand, as if everyone knows they are sketching the future of an entire species. The blueprint of survival is no ordinary plan. It is the boldest engineering endeavor ever conceived, an interstellar lifeboat meant to carry civilization itself across the cosmic sea. Designing a starship to cradle life for centuries demands more than advanced technology. It requires foresight into futures unseen. On these glowing schematics, Delicate ecosystems are drawn within steel hulls, and tiny human figures are sketched walking under simulated skies. The vessels must be self-contained worlds, complete with forests for air, oceans for water, and fields for food, all encased in metal and composites strong enough to withstand the void. Every system is redundant and reinforced. Every material is chosen to endure the slow decay of time, the battering of cosmic radiation, and the silence of interstellar space. Early in the planning, some proposed an alternative. Could the voyagers sleep through the centuries in suspended animation? Such technology, though researched, remained unproven for the timescales needed. Moreover, there was a philosophical reluctance to entrust humanity's survival to an unconscious dream. In the end, the blueprint embraced life awake and aware, a travelling society rather than a cargo of sleepers, believing that a living crew tending their world ship would be more resilient and adaptable to whatever challenges awaited in the interstellar dark. Teams of scientists, architects, and artists collaborate to solve the puzzles of living in space. They imagine how generations will be born, grow old, and pass on stories under an artificial sky. Psychologists weigh how to keep people inspired when the only horizon is a metal wall, while biologists plan gardens that can flourish without a naturally changing sun. In this blueprint stage, every conceivable challenge is raised and answered with innovation and hope, so that the final design becomes a tapestry woven from all human knowledge. To ensure no variable is overlooked, supercomputers run endless simulations of the voyage. They model everything from meteor impacts and system failures to population growth and unforeseen crises decades down the line. The digital crews aboard these virtual ships live and die thousands of times over in the span of days, revealing weaknesses in the design and social plan. Each result, whether a successful arrival or a catastrophe, feeds back into refining the blueprint. Through these simulated centuries, engineers gain confidence that the real journey will at least begin with the best wisdom preparation can provide. And yet, every designer and scientist knows that uncertainties remain. No plan can guarantee success. Still, they forge ahead with a collective faith that this carefully crafted blueprint holds humanity's best chance at survival. Within the blueprint's margins lies more than engineering. It sketches the outline of a society as well. Planners draft guidelines for how the travelers will govern themselves, how disputes will be resolved, how education will continue through generations born in transit. They plan archives to carry the whole of human history and art, libraries etched in crystal and memory, so that no knowledge is lost between the stars. Religious leaders and philosophers are consulted too, helping frame rituals and traditions that might comfort and bind a community adrift in space. Every aspect of life, from how food is shared to how holidays are celebrated, is considered in advance. It is woven into the design so that the vessels carry not just people and plants, but a living culture as well. Some call these ships humanity's modern-day arks, recalling ancient tales of salvation from a great flood. But unlike the wooden boats of myth, these arks are forged from cutting-edge alloys and guided by advanced AI minds that never sleep. The romance of the idea meets the rigor of science here, each inspiring the other. In truth, the blueprint blends both dream and calculation, charting a vessel that exists first in imagination, and soon, if all goes well, in solid steel among the stars. In truth, this interstellar effort is the next chapter of a story as old as our species. Ages ago, human ancestors left their first homelands to explore new lands, carrying fire and hope across uncharted continents, Later generations built ships to cross oceans, seeking fresh horizons when old ones closed. Now, the ocean is the cosmos itself, and these arcs are the canoes and caravels of a new age, the same spirit of exploration and desperation that once pushed nomads over distant mountain ranges now compels an entire planet to reach for the stars. Late one night, in a quiet design hall, a lone engineer stands before a hollow display of the starship. The projection bathes the room in a ghostly blue light, outlining the cylindrical vessel that will carry hopes into space. She reaches out and runs her hand through the shimmering blueprint, as if she could already touch the real ship. In that moment, her thoughts drift to the future inhabitants, children laughing in those corridors she's drawn, families gazing at distant suns through viewports she's placed. A gentle determination settles in her heart. This is no mere technical exercise, but a labor of love for generations she will never meet. With a faint, tired smile, she saves the final design. In the hush of that empty room, she whispers a promise that the ship will indeed fly one day. This blueprint of survival is more than engineering. It is a promise etched in lines and calculations. In it lies the quiet hope of billions, a hope that somewhere in the darkness between stars, these arcs will keep the spark of humanity alive. As plans crystallize into final schematics, one can sense a subtle shift in the world's mood, an almost imperceptible lift, as if the weight of impending extinction is slightly eased by the outline of a possible escape. In the end, one design is chosen to be replicated across a fleet of sister ships, each a lifeboat for a slice of humanity. Yet knowing what must be built only underscores the enormity of the task ahead. The materials, the labor, the sheer scale of effort required to forge this dream into reality on a dying Earth. Yet a blueprint alone cannot fly. To transform those careful plans into actual starships, humanity must turn to the Earth one last time, extracting the raw materials needed for this grand escape. In a bitter twist of fate, the dying planet is to be mined for its final gifts, its bones and blood, the metals, minerals, and fuel that will become the ribs and skin of the Ark fleet. Across continents, mines that were long thought exhausted are reopened, their shafts plunging deep into the ground to haul up ores under the fading light of a wounded sky. The earth groans with each excavation, ancient mountains reduced to quarries, old forests cleared for the minerals hidden beneath their roots, all in service of building the vessels that will leave this world behind. In one city, a veteran steelworker finds himself dismantling a stadium where he once cheered as a boy. Sparks fly from his cutting torch as he removes girder after girder under floodlights. He pauses occasionally, wiping sweat and soot from his brow, and takes in the hollow shell of what was once a place of joy and unity. In his mind, echoes of roaring crowds still linger in the silent bleachers. It hurts him to tear it down, yet he works on with steady hands. He knows that the steel beams loaded onto trucks tonight will soon support the ribs of a starship, carrying the cheers and dreams of humanity far beyond this empty arena. That thought gives him the strength to ignite his torch again, sacrificing a piece of home to build a future among the stars. Every scrap of salvageable material is gathered. Ruined cities, long abandoned due to floods or droughts, are picked apart for steel beams and copper wires. Derelict ships in ghostly harbours are towed to giant breakers, their hulls dismantled so the metal can be melted and reforged for a new purpose. Even the debris of past industries, rusting machines and vehicles left in deserts, finds its way into the smelters. Humanity combs through its own ruins with fervour, determined not to let anything useful go to waste, knowing that what is collected now may spell the difference between success and failure among the stars. Even landmarks and relics of the old world are quietly harvested. The iron framework of a long-abandoned tower, the steel girders of stadiums and bridges, all a fair game. What once symbolized human achievement in art or nationhood now finds a second life as raw material for survival. There is regret in this, a collective pang as familiar skylines diminish, but also a grim understanding that these sacrifices are the price of a future. In massive foundries that glow hot against the night, these gathered elements are purified and poured into molds. Rivers of molten metal flow as they cast the colossal frames and plates that will form the skeletons of the starships. The air trembles with the thunder of forge hammers shaping titanium alloys, and sparks dance like brief stars as welders fuse segments of hull together. It is an industrial symphony, both awe-inspiring and mournful. Mankind's final great factories working at full tilt, even as the world outside them withers. The very lifeblood of Earth, its iron, its copper, its carbon, transforms here into components of vessels that will sail beyond every horizon. The environmental cost is staggering, and yet largely ignored now. Skies above the industrial zones burn with a permanent twilight, coloured by smoke and ash from continuous production. Rivers near factories steam with heat and chemicals, their fish long gone, sacrificed in the name of progress. Where once there might have been protests and outcry, now there is grim acceptance that this final push will likely be the last great wound inflicted on Earth, a wound opened to ensure humanity's survival among the stars. Energy, too, is diverted to this singular purpose. Aging oil wells are tapped for their remaining drops to fuel construction machinery. Long idle nuclear reactors are brought back online to power fabrication plants day and night, even as their cooling towers loom over barren landscapes. New solar farms bloom under dusty skies to capture every ray of sun left, channeling electricity straight into the shipyards and assembly lines. The world's once diverse industries now converge into one, building the arc fleet. No effort is spared, no resource left unused if it can propel humanity forward. For those not directly involved in construction, daily life changes in countless ways. Energy rationing becomes commonplace. Cities dim their lights and endure scheduled blackouts so that power can be conserved for the shipyards. Consumer goods grow scarce as factories pivot entirely to producing spaceship components, forcing people to reuse and make do with what they have. Travel is restricted to save fuel. Long drives and commercial flights become relics of a more carefree time. Almost everyone, in one way or another, feels the collective strain of this all-out effort. They bear it with quiet resolve, knowing the burden is temporary and necessary. Millions of hands put aside other work to join the mission. Skilled labourers and volunteers alike swarm the construction sites, from coastal dry docks converted to spaceship yards, to high-tech assembly bays sealed against toxic air outside. People who once built skyscrapers or airplanes now weld and rivet on the hulls of interstellar craft, feeling a solemn pride in each completed section. Even far from the factories, farmers grow specialized crops to be processed into polymers and composites, and chemists toil refining rare elements for advanced electronics. It is a monumental collaboration, as if the whole species has become a single workforce bent to one purpose: survival beyond Earth. There is an undeniable sadness that accompanies this great effort. Every material taken, every forest felled for ship timber or rare minerals, is a reminder of what is being lost. Some workers pause as they tear down the remnants of their childhood homes for raw steel, whispering silent apologies to the land. In quiet moments, engineers and miners alike wonder if Earth will forgive this final ransacking, or if it even matters now. In their hearts, they know there is no turning back. Humanity has staked its future on departure, even if it means a hollowed planet in their wake. But they all carry on, driven by the knowledge that without this sacrifice, none would live to remember Earth at all. All the while, Earth's decline accelerates, lending urgency to the work. Each passing summer is hotter than the last, and each winter more erratic. Coastal cities continue to flood, and farmland turns to dust in expanding droughts. News of fresh calamities, a collapsing ice shelf, a species declared extinct, a once great river running dry, only hardens the resolve of those labouring on the arcs. It is as if the planet itself is urging them on, reminding everyone that time is short. In this twilight of Earth, former rival nations cooperate in ways once thought impossible. A global coalition oversees the effort over years of frantic work, allocating every resource so that metal from one continent and fuel from another all find their way into the same endeavour. The usual politics of profit and power fall away in the face of extinction. There is simply no time for them. What remains is a collective resolve, a promise among humankind to see these ships built and launched, no matter the cost. Slowly, over years of ceaseless labour, the Ark fleet begins to take shape. By the third year of construction, the first massive hull ring is completed and lifted into orbit, a shining curve visible even through Earth's hazy skies. By the 10th year, multiple ship frames drift side by side above the planet, like a new constellation slowly being assembled by human hands. The dream of an interstellar ark is no longer just lines on paper, but metal and structure emerging against the backdrop of the stars. In orbital shipyards glittering above Earth's atmosphere, and in vast desert dry docks repurposed for the task, the skeletons of starships grow section by section. Towering hull segments are bolted and welded together, forming enormous cylinders and domes. The silhouette of each unfinished ship becomes clearer by the day, hinting at the colossal vessel it will soon be. As these empty shells are completed, attention shifts inward, to filling them with all the ingredients of a living world, to turning cold metal chambers into places that can sustain gardens, animals, and generations of humans on an endless voyage. Deep within each ship's immense hull, the final cargo is loaded and secured. Entire libraries of knowledge are stored in crystal drives, containing the sum of human art, science, and history. Crates of tools and machines for building a colony lie beside seeds and soil from Earth, ready to sow new farms on distant ground. There are preserved embryos of animals and carefully packaged cultural treasures, musical instruments, works of art, holy texts, the intangible pieces of home meant to accompany humanity's leap. Everything that a new world might require, from medical supplies to simple hand plows, finds a place in the cavernous holds. It is a peculiar Noah's Ark of the modern age, not of animals 2 by 2, but of all the tools and tales a civilization deems essential for rebirth beyond Earth. Inside the cavernous hull of a half-built ship, the first green shoots of life emerge. Teams of ecologists and agronomists carefully transplant seedlings into nutrient-rich soil spread over deck plates. Under arrays of full-spectrum lamps that mimic the sun, tiny leaves unfurl, unaware that their sky is artificial. These are the pioneers of the ship's ecosystem, hardy grasses, algae, and fungi introduced to establish the base of a life cycle. With each day, the sterile smell of metal gives way slightly to the damp scent of earth and growing things, a promise that the lifeless interior will soon flourish. As conditions stabilize, more complex life follows. Engineers flood certain sections with recycled water to create ponds and humid biomes, while horticulturists plant saplings that will one day grow into small forests under the domed ceilings. The hum of ventilation systems becomes the breeze for artificial meadows, and in time, insects are released, bees to pollinate the new flowers, and worms in the soil to aerate and enrich it. Little by little, the hollow vessel transforms into a patchwork of habitats, a microcosm of Earth with prairies and groves, rippling water, and even controlled rain showers, all confined within curved walls of steel. Maintaining a balance within these sealed ecosystems is an intricate dance. Atmosphere processors quietly monitor oxygen and carbon dioxide, adjusting levels as thousands of plants breathe and grow. Water circulators recycle every drop, from mist in the air to condensation on the walls, imitating Earth's rain cycle in miniature. Now and then, unexpected problems arise. A surge of mold in a damp corner, or an algae bloom in the ponds growing faster than expected. But each challenge is met with patient care and fine-tuning, gradually teaching the caretakers how to keep this artificial Eden in harmony. The engineers have also built in layers of safeguards for these enclosed worlds. Each habitat zone can be sealed off by bulkheads in an emergency, preserving air and life in other sections if one compartment is compromised. Critical systems like water recycling and power have duplicates and triplicates, ready to take over without a moment's pause should a primary unit falter. The ships even carry reserves of soil, seeds, and nutrient stock in case any part of the ecosystem needs restarting. Such precautions mean that the arks are prepared not just to thrive, but to endure hardships, mimicking the resilience of Earth's own biosphere in the face of adversity. Life on these ships is peaceful in ways Earth no longer is. Here, the weather obeys human design. When it rains inside the ark, it does so gently and on schedule, nourishing crops without floods or droughts. The temperature remains comfortably mild, unaffected by the turmoil of a changing climate. There are no storms unless deliberately simulated, no seasons unless programmed, making the environment feel oddly Edenic. For those who spend time inside, it is a respite, a calm, stable bubble of life set against the chaos unfolding back on Earth. In time, animals are carefully introduced to the growing habitats. Small birds flit between the new trees, their songs bringing gentle normalcy to the artificial morning. Fish swim in clear pools, nibbling on algae and keeping the aquatic environment balanced. A few livestock animals, chickens, goats, are brought on board in controlled numbers, both as future sustenance and as living pieces of Earth's legacy. Each creature's role is considered: pollinators, grazers, scavengers, all part of the tapestry of life being woven inside the starship's walls. Of course, only a fraction of Earth's living creatures can travel on these ships in the flesh. There is simply no room for herds of elephants or pods of whales, nor could the delicate balance support apex predators roaming free. Instead, the essence of Earth's biodiversity is preserved in other ways. Seeds from tens of thousands of plant species lie dormant in vaults on each ark, and genetic samples of countless animals are stored in cryogenic libraries. Should the travelers reach a new world, these precious archives may one day help revive species and restore ecosystems that would otherwise be lost forever. The idea of a self-sustaining world inside a ship was once science fiction, tested only in small terrestrial labs. Early experiments decades ago showed how easily a closed environment could tip out of balance. Now, armed with better science and urgent necessity, humanity applies those hard lessons on a grand scale. Each ark becomes a floating terrarium, its caretakers fine-tuning soil chemistry, pruning overgrown vines, and ensuring no one species overwhelms the rest. In these efforts, there is a quiet reverence, a sense that they are not just building a habitat, but preserving a fragment of Earth's soul to carry into the cosmos. Inside one ship's growing garden, a botanist kneels among rows of green sprouts under the glow of an artificial dawn. Gently, she dusts pollen from one tomato blossom to another with a small brush, mimicking the absent bees before those insects were introduced. Each delicate leaf she touches reminds her of the garden her grandmother once kept back on Earth. And for a moment, the memories and the present blend. She closes her eyes and inhales. The scent of moist soil and new leaves is comforting, transporting her to simpler times. The seedlings are delicate, but under her careful touch, they flourish day by day. Opening her eyes, she looks around at the seedlings thriving in their trays. A tender smile forms as she whispers encouragement to them, her voice soft in the quiet as she tells the tiny leaves they are growing strong, a promise that the spirit of Earth will live on beyond the planet's end. In that quiet moment, amid the hum of ventilators and the trickle of recycled water, she feels hope take root as firmly as any plant. She knows this miniature Eden is more than an experiment. It is proof that life can journey beyond Earth. Overseeing all this is a quiet army of sensors and automated systems. They work invisibly in the background, regulating temperature and humidity, adjusting light levels to simulate seasons, and sounding gentle alarms if any part of the ecosystem drifts off course. Advanced AI monitors the data endlessly, learning the rhythms of this artificial biosphere, much as a farmer watches the weather. Yet human eyes and hands are always present too, tending crops, feeding animals, or simply walking these verdant corridors to feel the life around them. In the interplay of technology and tending, the ark's inner gardens begin to thrive, a green heart beating steadily within each ship. Gradually, as each ship's ecosystem settles into equilibrium, test inhabitants spend increasing time on board. Scientists and engineers volunteer to live inside for weeks at a stretch, eating the ship-grown produce and breathing its recycled air. They walk under the faux sky and sleep beside indoor fields, becoming the first to experience life in these man-made worlds. Their reports are cautiously optimistic. The air is fresh, the water clean, the crops nourishing. There are still adjustments to make, but with every successful trial, the dream of a self-sufficient ark inches closer to reality. The volunteers who live in these prototype habitats often describe a surreal serenity. They miss the open sky and the wild breezes of Earth, yet there is comfort in the green enclosure around them. Some speak of a slight melancholy at night beneath an artificial dusk, knowing the real stars are just beyond a wall they cannot see through. But more than that, they feel a growing peace, a sense that within these walls, life can continue, safe from the chaos outside. This gentle acceptance is a promising sign. Humans can indeed find home in these crafted oases. With the arks nearing completion, their interiors teeming with carefully cultivated life, a profound question comes into sharp focus. Who will travel on these ships? There is room for only a fortunate few out of the multitudes on Earth. Deciding the passengers of this one-way voyage becomes its own monumental challenge, an ethical and logistical puzzle that must be solved under the pressure of a ticking planetary clock. The vessels may be nearly ready to sustain life, But now humanity must choose which lives will embark on this exodus and which will remain behind in the twilight of Earth. In every nation, in every city, there are thousands of hopefuls for every berth available on the ships. Mothers and fathers line up with children in their arms at selection centers, offering skills, pleading their case for a future among the stars. Young students boast of their adaptability and eagerness to learn, while elders quietly submit records of their wisdom and life experience, daring to hope there might be a place even for them. The selection process is exhaustive and, at least in design, impartial. Applications, interviews, health screenings, genetic tests, all attempting to distill humanity into the essential mix needed to survive and thrive on a new world. Behind closed doors, committees weigh countless factors. The arks will need farmers as much as physicians, mechanics alongside teachers, scientists alongside artisans to carry culture forward. The goal is to assemble a balanced community, a seed of society that can reproduce and govern itself over centuries. Planners consider age and family structure, ensuring enough young people to have children and enough experienced minds to guide them. They scrutinize medical histories to reduce the risk of preventable illness on the journey. They even deliberate on personalities, aiming to select those who can endure close quarters and isolation with resilience and cooperation. Genetic diversity becomes another crucial piece of the puzzle. Humanity's future gene pool is carefully analysed by geneticists who recommend that the chosen come from all corners of the globe, representing a broad spectrum of ethnic backgrounds and traits. To supplement diversity and guard against calamity, sperm and egg banks are prepared, and thousands of embryos are frozen. Potential lives kept in stasis as a backup plan for populating a distant colony. In this way, even more people have a chance, indirectly, to be part of the voyage. Their genetic legacy will travel, even if their physical selves remain on Earth. Even with such meticulous planning, the process cannot escape ethical questions. By what right can one person be chosen over another? The committees grapple with this heavy responsibility, sometimes resorting to lotteries for a portion of the spots to introduce an element of chance amid the judgment. Protests flare outside some selection centres, desperate crowds begging for reconsideration or decrying the choices as biased. A few individuals, in contrast, reject the very premise of leaving at all. Even if offered a place, they refuse to go, vowing to stay with Earth out of loyalty, guilt, or grief. These defiant refusals are rare and quiet, but they underscore the tangled emotions of this exodus. The people working on the lists carry the weight of all these pleas on their shoulders. Many lose sleep, haunted by the knowledge that for every name they approve, dozens more must be left behind. For many of those left on the wait lists or politely turned away, there comes a mix of bitterness and grace. Some families make the cruel choice to send their children on without them, reasoning that at least a part of them will live on among the stars. Others, knowing they will not go, still volunteer in construction and training, determined to help those who will. In towns and villages around the world, communities hold heartfelt farewells for neighbours destined to leave, offering keepsakes and letters to carry into space. These gestures, small and grand, weave a complex tapestry of sorrow, pride, envy, and altruism as humanity decides its future. In a small apartment, one of the chosen passengers sits by a dim lamp, pen in hand. She is a young student who has just learned she will board the ships, but her parents will not. Now she writes to them in a letter, even though they are only a room away, a family habit to put feelings into words. The lines come slowly, her handwriting trembling as she tries to express gratitude, love, and the ache in her heart. How do you say goodbye when only you will go on? She promises to carry their memory into the stars, to tell future generations about the family left on Earth who made her journey possible. Tears blot the ink in places, but she continues until she has said everything she can. Folding the pages carefully, she knows they will be read and reread long after she's gone, a piece of her remaining at home and a piece of home travelling with her. Meanwhile, those who have been selected begin rigorous preparations for life off-world. Intensive training camps run for months and even years to equip them with every essential skill. Participants rotate through courses in spacecraft maintenance, emergency medicine, hydroponic farming, and techniques for resolving conflicts in close quarters. They discuss how to raise children in a metal world without a natural sky, and how to keep traditions and morale alive across generations. Every topic, from the practical to the profound, is addressed to ensure these pioneers can handle the challenges of building a new society in transit. In simulators, the future crew practice living under the ship's unique conditions. They learn to walk under a slightly different gravity than Earth's and adapt to an enclosed environment of recycled air and water. Drills rehearse every imaginable scenario, from medical emergencies to repairing habitat systems, until cooperation and calm in crisis become second nature. By the end of training, each person is not only skilled, but mentally prepared to treat the artificial world of the Ark as their new home. In tandem with their training, many of the chosen relocate to communities near the launch sites, or even spend short periods in orbit, gradually accustoming themselves to life away from Earth's surface. As launch day edges closer, the chosen passengers start to form their own close-knit community. They learn each other's languages and customs, knowing that on the ships they will rely on one another across cultures and generations. In the evenings after training, small groups gather to share music, stories, and dreams about the new world they hope to build. Children among them play at Starship Life, turning a playground into a pretend spaceship corridor, their laughter echoing with unburdened optimism. Bit by bit, a society in miniature is coalescing, one that carries the diversity of Earth and a unified resolve to journey beyond the only home humanity has ever known. Each chosen individual must also face the poignant task of leaving almost everything behind. Space aboard the Arks is precious, so luggage is limited perhaps to a single small bag per person. They agonize over what to carry into the future. A family photo album, a favorite book, a small heirloom passed down through generations. Some write journals or record messages to leave behind, knowing they cannot take all their memories with them. In the end, those boarding the ships bring only tokens of Earth, symbols of who they were and what they hope not to forget. At last, the passenger lists are finalized, and the chosen know who they are. They carry a mingled feeling of survivor's guilt and immeasurable luck, saying goodbye to friends and family who will not join them. In hushed voices or private prayers, many promise to justify their salvation, to live and work in honor of those who cannot make the journey. Around the globe, the countdown to departure begins. The arcs stand ready, humming with life, and humanity's focus shifts one more time to the enormous task of launching these world ships into the void. The final phase of preparation is underway. Earth's farewell to its departing children, marked by the greatest engineering feats yet undertaken on the planet that made them. One of the final marvels to rise from Earth's surface is a towering launch elevator, a ribbon of nanofiber stretching from ground to orbit. This space elevator, anchored deep in equatorial bedrock and reaching into the heavens, becomes the main artery for transferring people and goods to the waiting starships above. Along its length, climber vehicles laden with equipment and passengers glide up and down, powered by solar energy and guided by lasers, defying gravity in slow, graceful ascents. This structure, the tallest and longest ever built, is both bridge and parting gesture, connecting Earth to sky one last time so that humanity can climb beyond its cradle. Elsewhere, spaceports roar back to life for one final series of launches. Massive boosters, assembled with the last stocks of fuel, stand poised to fire. Each rocket launch is a spectacle against the dimming sky, plumes of flame and thunder carrying cargo pods or additional crew who could not reach the elevator. Island launch pads and desert runways, once quiet, now shake day after day as the final components and passengers are ferried to orbit. The rumble of rockets becomes a farewell song of Earth, a chorus of engines accompanying the departure preparations. In orbit, the fleet of arcs drifts patiently, tethered to temporary scaffolds and space docks. Engineers in pressurized suits scurry like ants over the hulls, making last-minute checks and adjustments in the vacuum. Fuel reservoirs are topped off with precious propellants from Earth's last refineries, and navigation systems are calibrated one final time using stars that soon will be distant memories. Each ship is a leviathan gleaming in sunlight above the clouds, nearly ready for the voyage. The final connections to the docks will soon release, and once loyal machines that built them will fall away, leaving the arcs fully autonomous and alone in space, save for their human cargo. On the ground, a sprawling mission control center buzzes around the clock. Walls of monitors display telemetry from each arc, oxygen levels in the biomes, engine readouts, crew check-ins. Technicians and officials speak in hushed voices and multiple languages, coordinating across continents to ensure nothing is missed. This is the nerve center of the Exodus, the last great concert of human coordination on Earth, where every alarm or anomaly is met with swift response. As the final hours approach, tension and anticipation mingle in the air. Decades of work and hope have come down to these critical moments. Among the dozens of people in mission control, 2 colleagues sit side by side, monitoring the final readouts. They have been on this project since the beginning, through every setback and triumph, and now the moment of truth has arrived. One of them, an elderly flight director with tired eyes, clutches a small photograph of his grandchildren who will be aboard the lead ship. The other, a younger systems engineer, silently mouths a prayer he learned as a child. At T-10 seconds, their hands meet in a brief, tight grasp. In that simple gesture, years of effort, anxiety, and hope pass between them. No words are spoken, none are needed. Both stare at the data scrolling before them, hearts pounding, as the final seconds tick away and humanity's future balances on the edge of the unknown. In the world below, humanity prepares for goodbye. Across the globe, people gather around screens to watch the launch events, or climb onto rooftops and hilltops for a last glimpse of the arcs as moving stars against the sky. Leaders deliver somber addresses carried on every frequency, bidding safe journey to those departing and offering comfort to those who remain. In many places, people join together in ceremonies unique to their culture. Some sing ancestral songs of farewell, others hold quiet candlelit vigils through the night, and others launch paper lanterns carrying written prayers into the twilight sky. In temples and public squares, candles are lit and bells rung in homage to this moment, a ritual of parting on a planetary scale. Some write messages and names on balloons and set them free, small symbols of hope and remembrance rising toward the heavens. At the base of the space elevator, and the gates of launch sites, final goodbyes are said face to face. Parents embrace children one last time, memorizing every detail of beloved faces. Lifelong friends hold each other in wordless farewell, aware that this parting is likely forever. For the departing, these moments are a bittersweet prelude to the stars. For those left behind, they are the closing of a precious chapter. In trembling voices, people speak their last words of love and encouragement, praying that somehow these echoes of human connection will carry across whatever distance comes. Even the planet itself seems to hold its breath. Storms on the horizon pause as if in awe, and a strange hush falls over cities that once bustled with noise. For a brief time, conflicts and daily worries are set aside as all eyes turn upward. There is fear in this silence, and grief, but also a fragile thread of hope winding through millions of hearts. In this collective pause, Earth and its people unite in a final shared moment, the last, before their paths diverge into different futures. For the first time since life began on this planet, a living piece of Earth is preparing to detach and voyage into the unknown. This departure is both extraordinary and poignant. It is an act of audacity and necessity, born out of desperation. Yet many quietly wonder whether the travelers will still feel an invisible cord binding them to their home world, or if they will truly become citizens of the cosmos. At last, the moment comes. High above, the Ark ships stir with final readiness. On every deck, the chosen passengers are strapped in or holding on, eyes wide with anticipation and tears. In the command centers aboard each vessel, captains and navigators exchange steady, focused looks. They know the weight of every soul on board and every hope resting upon their voyage. A voice on Earth commences the final countdown, calm but quavering at the edges, marking the seconds to departure. 0. From the surface, spectators see points of light flaring in the dusk sky as the Ark fleet's engines ignite in unison. The ground shudders faintly underfoot. Or perhaps it is just hearts pounding with the enormity of what is happening. Slowly, majestically, the great ships begin to move, leaving their docks and berths behind. A collective gasp rises from Earth's surface. The journey has begun, humanity's boldest leap into the unknown. None can truly know what awaits beyond the veil of darkness. Yet hope outweighs fear, as one by one, the arks glide away from their birthplace. The story of humanity's exodus just beginning. The hopes of an entire species carried into the endless night ahead. As the bright points of the departing ships shrink and vanish into the night, a stillness falls across the world. On every hilltop and in every street where people gathered to watch, there is a long pause, as if no one is certain what to do next. Eventually, quiet conversations stir, and life resumes its hesitant pace. Some weep openly, while others stand silently, with faces turned to the sky a while longer. In time, those left behind will return to their homes beneath an emptier sky, comforted only by the knowledge that a part of humanity has escaped, carrying their dreams into the cosmos. Dawn broke with an uncanny stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath. On the edge of the horizon, darkness slowly gave way to a pale blue glow, heralding the sun's approach on this final morning. Towering against the dim sky stood the generation ships, their colossal silhouettes braced on launch pads that glistened with dew. beneath their towering hulls, each an ark carrying thousands of lives and the dreams of generations. Ground crews made last-minute retreats to safe distance. For years these vessels had loomed in silent preparation, monuments of hope and engineering, and now at last their hour had come. In the chilly air, a faint mist clung to the ground, and every sound seemed muffled, as though nature itself were pausing in reverence for what was about to unfold. Far above, stars lingered in the sky's retreating darkness, soon to fade in the light of day. A hush lay over control centers and crowds alike, uniting the planet in a single moment of anticipation. Inside the ships, hundreds of passengers strapped into their seats with hearts pounding, each aware that history was balancing on the next few minutes. Many closed their eyes in silent prayer or reflection, gripping armrests in each other's hands as they waited. Down on the ground, engineers and launch teams exchanged final nods, voices low and steady as they confirmed every system one last time. Countdown clocks ticked ever closer to zero, the numbers glowing steadily, matching the racing pulse of humanity's collective heart. In command rooms around the world, teams of flight directors spoke in measured tones. One by one, systems reported ready: guidance, navigation, life support, all green. At T-1 minute, a final call rang out. All stations, go for launch. A chorus of affirmations followed, calm yet charged with emotion. This was it, the culmination of years of effort and the hopes of an entire planet. At last, the final second arrived. The silence shattered as each ship's engines roared to life in blinding fury. On one side of the planet, dawn was suddenly outshone by the brilliant flare beneath a rising vessel, turning early morning shadow into daylight. On the far side, under midnight skies, distant onlookers gasped as an artificial starburst blossomed on the horizon. A deep, thunderous rumble rolled across plains and cities, rattling windows and swelling in the chests of all who listened. The ground itself trembled in awe as the first-generation ship strained against Earth's pull, its massive frame shuddering and then slowly, almost reluctantly, beginning to lift. In a nearby marsh, birds took to the air in a frantic flock as the rumbling reached them, their silhouettes scattering across the glowing sky. Flames gushed from the engines in a continuous torrent, carving a pillar of fire beneath the ascending ship. Slowly at first, the craft rose on that brilliant column, dragging itself free of the launch pad's embrace. Within moments its speed increased, and the roar deepened, echoing across empty coastlines and far distant hills. High above, clouds ignited orange as the burning Leviathan punched through the lower atmosphere, trailing a vast plume of smoke and incandescent gas. One by one, at launch sites across continents, other ships followed suit, each a spear of light thrusting toward the heavens. From a distance, they appeared like new suns being born and climbing skyward, a sight both magnificent and surreal, painted across the dawn and midnight skies alike. As the ships pierced higher into the thinning atmosphere, their fiery tails remained visible to millions far below. One by one, spent booster rockets detached with dazzling bursts, casting off burning fragments that arced back toward the Earth. For a moment, each discarded stage left a glittering trail as it tumbled down, like a falling star returning home. Yet the main vessels pressed on, ever faster, lighter now with every piece shed, forging a path toward the freedom of space. Against the deep blue of the upper sky, their exhaust plumes spread out like the petals of some immense, luminous flower blooming in slow motion. It was a spectacle at the very edge of Earth's cradle, the last grand fireworks show of a civilization departing its birthplace. Inside the lead ship, every structure quivered and howled with the fury of launch. Passengers felt themselves thrust back into their seats as gravity's grip fought against the engine's surge. Many had never known acceleration like this. It pressed the air from their lungs and made their hearts hammer faster. The thunder outside was a constant vibration within, a steady, violent shudder that blurred vision and rattled teeth. Some clenched their jaws and squeezed their eyes shut, focusing only on breathing as the force pinned them down. Others peered through small viewports or watched screens showing an external view, glimpsing clouds racing past, flames dancing at the ship's periphery, a sight equal parts terrifying and breathtaking. For some aboard, the roar of the engines was matched by a roar of emotions within. In those seconds of ascent, they saw in their mind's eye the faces of loved ones they had kissed goodbye, the homes and familiar streets left behind, and they promised themselves that this great leap would not be in vain. Then, after several relentless minutes, the pressure began to ebb. The ferocious growl of the engines faded to a distant rumble, and then into an uncanny quiet. In that instant, many aboard realized they had done it. They had reached space. Weightlessness gently took hold. Straps that had dug into shoulders now hung loose, and a few unsecured objects drifted lazily past astonished faces. Ears rang in the silence that followed, broken only by the sound of laboured breathing and muffled sobs of relief and joy. Cautiously, some opened their eyes and unclenched their hands. Through their viewports, an otherworldly sight greeted them. The gentle curve of Earth's horizon, glowing faintly with the light of dawn, and above it, the endless black of space spangled with stars. Tears floated free in zero gravity as a few passengers wept quietly, overcome by the moment. They had left the ground behind at last, riding on pillars of fire into the great unknown, cities watching the sky. While the travellers floated in the weightlessness of orbit, far below on the planet's surface, countless faces were still turned toward the sky. Across the world, humanity had paused to witness this moment, an entire species watching its children leave home. In city squares and open fields, on rooftops and high-rise balconies, people stood frozen in awe and trepidation as the fiery trails of the departing ships climbed higher and higher. Even in places where clouds or daylight hid the spectacle, live broadcasts projected the ascent onto giant screens, ensuring no one missed this historic event. For a brief time, the bustle of daily life was forgotten. Traffic ground to a halt, conversations died away, and eyes glistened with tears as Earth's long goodbye played out overhead. In one capital city, throngs had flooded the streets at daybreak, necks craned back as they searched the heavens between silhouetted skyscrapers. They pointed and gasped when at last a tiny spark appeared high above, moving steadily upward and trailing a faint thread of smoke. Some clutched small flags or photographs of loved ones on board, pressing them to their hearts as they whispered farewells. A ripple of applause and cheers broke out as the glow climbed higher, but it was tempered by tears and embraces among strangers and friends alike. Under the neon billboards and century-old domes of the city skyline, humanity stood united in wonder and sorrow, sharing a moment that felt both triumphant and heartbreaking. In quiet rural villages, half a world away, families huddled in open fields beneath the morning sky. Elders who remembered the first satellite launches and moon landings now wiped their eyes as they witnessed something far greater, the departure of their descendants to the stars. Children sat atop their parents' shoulders, too young to fully grasp why tears rolled down the adults' cheeks as they watched the bright streak climb until it vanished. A farmer stood leaning against his old truck, hat in hand, whispering a hopeful prayer for those brave souls heading out, even as he knew his own feet would likely never leave the soil of Earth. In that humble gathering, there was pride that a part of humanity would carry on, and profound sadness at the thought that this was truly goodbye. At one coastal spaceport's viewing area, just beyond the security perimeter, relatives of the departed clustered together. They had come as close as allowed to watch their loved ones ride that pillar of fire into the sky. Now, as the rumble faded, they remained rooted in place, holding on to one another with eyes red and faces streaked from tears. A mother whispered her child's name into the wind. As if in answer, the clouds above glowed one last time with the rocket's fire before fading to grey. No one wanted to be the first to turn away, to break their gaze upward and accept that their loved ones were truly gone beyond reach. So they stayed, long after the ships disappeared from view, staring at the empty sky and imagining those bright specks carrying pieces of their hearts into the stars. Even at the farthest reaches of the globe, the departure was marked. In Antarctica's polar twilight, a handful of bundled researchers at a lonely outpost stepped outside into the sub-zero air. On the horizon, where perpetual night met ice, they discerned a faint golden streak rising. It was one of the ships, climbing beyond the atmosphere. In the eerie hush of that frozen land, the scientists pulled off their bulky caps and stood in awe, aware that even from the ends of the earth, they were witnessing humanity's new beginning. All around the globe, emotions ran across a poignant spectrum from joy to despair. For some, the launch was a moment of fierce pride, proof of humanity's ingenuity and a hope for redemption beyond a dying planet. For others, it was an almost unbearable sorrow and guilt, a painful realization that this exodus was necessary only because their beloved Earth was fading, wounded by humanity's own hand. In the most ravaged corners of the world, flooded coastlines, scorched plains, people watched with hollow eyes, feeling that hope itself was lifting off and leaving them behind. In places of worship, churches, mosques, and temples, filled with those praying for the travellers and for those who remained behind, seeking comfort amid the uncertainty. Strangers held hands during this pause in history, united by hope and regret all at once. Never before had the people of Earth felt so bound together, sharing one bittersweet feeling as they watched the tiny sparks of human ambition depart into the cosmic night. It was as though the very soul of the world hovered up there with the ships, hopeful, remorseful, and yearning toward a future unknown. Breaking the chains of gravity, high above the Earth, the fleet of generation ships drifted in low orbit, gliding along the curve of the planet. For the first time, humans were circling their home, not as visitors set to return, but as travellers preparing to depart for good. Stretched out below them, Earth's surface passed in panoramic view through the windows, swathes of white cloud and ocean blue, familiar continents coming in and out of sight as the ships coasted. In those initial moments of orbit, a collective sigh of relief mingled with awe spread among the crews and passengers. They had survived the launch and reached the threshold of space. But an even more profound step lay ahead, one that would carry them beyond this gentle orbit and onward to the stars. Inside each ship, the crew began preparations for the final escape from Earth's gravitational grasp. Navigators double-checked trajectories, ensuring each vessel was perfectly aligned for its departure burn. Through the bridge windows, Earth's horizon glowed with daylight on one side and night on the other, a breathtaking half-circle of blue and white, edged by the thin gold halo of atmosphere. Some travellers took these last moments in orbit to simply gaze at their home from above, etching every detail into memory. They knew this view, the living mosaic of their world, would soon be visible only as a shrinking point of light, and they clung to it with their eyes for as long as they could. All the while, a quiet tension built on board. The next ignition would finally sever the last gentle bond connecting them to Earth. At last, the call came over each ship's intercom to secure for the escape burn. Throughout the cabins and corridors, people moved to their seats or gripped handrails, bracing for this final push. A tremor ran through the hull as thrusters fired to orient the vessel, pointing its nose toward the infinite night beyond Earth. Then, in a controlled crescendo, the main engines came alive with a deep, sustained hum. Acceleration returned, pressing everyone back once more, though this time it was a steadier, gentler force compared to the violent jolt of liftoff. Through the viewports, the brilliant glow of the engine flared, and the great curve of Earth began to slide out of sight, receding as the spacecraft gained speed. As the ships accelerated, an invisible threshold was crossed, the point at which Earth's gravity could no longer hold them back. They were truly free now, moving fast enough to escape the planet that had always been home. Within minutes, the vessels reached escape velocity, racing outward at over 11 kilometers per second, faster than any humans had ever traveled relative to Earth. Moments later, the departure burn was complete, and the engines fell silent once more. In the quiet that followed, an unreal realization settled over everyone. The generation ships were now coasting on a one-way journey, leaving Earth behind for good. On the bridge, the flight commander's calm voice came over the comm, announcing a successful departure from Earth orbit. A gentle cheer spread through sections of each ship, and some spontaneous applause erupted. Many simply closed their eyes and exhaled the breath they had been holding, tears of relief and bittersweet triumph on their faces. They had done it, broken the chains of gravity that bound them to Earth, and set sail into the darkness ahead. As the cheers quieted, a crackling transmission arrived from Earth. Mission Control's voice, proud and trembling, offered congratulations and a final wish of Godspeed to the travelers. Peering out of various portholes, a few passengers could see faint pinpoints of light in the distance, the other generation ships moving outward alongside them. Each was a shining dot drifting further from Earth, a fleet of humanity making its exodus together. In that moment, exhilaration and melancholy swirled together as those aboard felt both the thrill of freedom and the ache of loss. Looking back at a vanishing world. As the initial shock of departure gave way to calm, more and more passengers made their way to windows and viewing ports. Everyone was drawn to the sight of Earth, the planet that had been their whole world, now drifting behind them. Framed against blackness, Earth looked breathtaking. A luminous blue marble swirled with white clouds, shining bravely in the void. At first it still filled much of the view, a dominant presence reminding all aboard of what they had left behind. But with each passing minute, that bright sphere grew a little smaller, its features blurring as the distance increased. Some pressed their hands gently against the glass, as if to hold on to the vision of home for just a moment longer. Others whispered quiet goodbyes, or stood in mute silence with tears brimming in their eyes. One young woman sat curled in a corner, eyes shut and cheeks wet, unable to bear watching her world slip away. A father lifted his small son up to a window, letting the child behold Earth one last time. The boy too young to understand the weight of the moment, but sensing the solemn hush around him. In the soft glow by the observation ports, families and strangers alike clustered together, sharing a wordless bond as they watched their planet shrink. It was a collective farewell, intimate and profound, each person grappling with the mix of heartache and wonder that the sight evoked. As hours went by, the Earth that once dominated their sky shrank to the size of a small coin, then smaller still. They could see the whole sphere at once now, oceans and continents and bright cloud swirls, all compressed into a single delicate disk suspended in the dark. The moon, pale and tiny, hovered near its mother world, a loyal companion now receding alongside Earth into the distance. Day and night passed over Earth's face as it rotated, revealing glints of sunlit oceans by day and the faint sparkle of city lights by night. Every detail kindled a memory. The curve of a coastline sparked one person's recollection of a childhood home. The gleam of sunlight on the Pacific reminded another of a morning by the sea. Such memories flickered in the minds of those watching their world grow ever more distant. By the time Earth had dwindled to a mere point of light, the crowd at the windows had thinned. Many had drifted back into the ship's interior to tend to children, or simply to sit with their thoughts. But a few souls stayed, gazing at that last glimmer of home, until it was almost indistinguishable from the countless stars around it. To the naked eye, Earth became just another star in the sky, a tiny pale spark in an endless sea of night. In that silence, many felt a deep shift in perspective, an overwhelming awareness that everyone and everything they had ever known was now on that vanishing speck behind them. Realizing this, a profound hush fell over those watching. It was humbling and heartbreaking all at once to see their entire world reduced to a pinpoint, then swallowed by the infinite dark. One of the elders aboard raised a trembling hand in a final silent wave, a gesture of goodbye to the planet that had given them everything. One passenger held a small pendant against her heart. Inside it, photos of family left behind, and she silently vowed to keep their memory alive on whatever new world awaited. In whispers, some offered prayers or personal farewells, words of gratitude and apology, carried only by the still air of the ship. Some recalled the words of early spacefarers, describing Earth's fragility and unity when seen from afar. Now that truth was visible to them, undeniable and poignant. And then, at last, Earth was gone from view, lost in the darkness of space, but alive in each of their memories. The first steps in the dark. The days following the departure from Earth took on a surreal quality for those aboard the generation ships. With the planet no longer in sight, the reality of their situation settled over them like the hush of space itself. To provide a sense of normalcy, the ship's systems instituted an artificial day-night cycle. Lights in the habitat bays and corridors slowly brightened to simulate morning, and a gentle chime sounded to encourage everyone to begin the day's activities. Though the sun was now just another distant star outside, inside the vessel it rose and set by human design, giving structure and routine to the voyage's first mornings. On that first artificial morning, the ship's captain addressed all passengers over the intercom. Her voice, warm and steady, echoed through every compartment as she acknowledged the heartbreak of leaving their world behind, and praised the courage it took to embark on this journey. She asked everyone to look around at their new community and to take care of one another, reminding them that every person on board was family now, bound by a shared destiny. There was a promise in her words, that as long as they stood together, the light of humanity would continue to shine, even in the depths of space. When her message ended, many aboard felt a calm resolve take hold. Quiet applause could be heard in some corridors, while others sat in contemplative silence. Neighbours exchanged determined nods, a few embracing. In that moment, A sense of unity spread throughout the ship. The captain's words brought comfort and resolve. Those who had felt adrift found strength in a common purpose. Slowly, the crew and passengers settled into routines to sustain them for the long journey. Engineers made rounds through humming control rooms and engine bays, checking life support gauges and tuning propulsion systems. In the agricultural domes and hydroponic gardens, botanists tended to rows of green crops, sprouts of lettuce, climbing vines of tomatoes, and even dwarf fruit trees, all thriving under bright grow lamps. An elderly botanist gently misted the leaves of a young sapling, humming a folk song as he worked. He thought of the garden he left behind on Earth, the scent of soil after rain, and smiled as he ran his fingers through the moist, recycled air. These plants would not only feed the travellers in months and years to come, but also bring a comforting touch of nature into their metal world. Water recyclers and air scrubbers were monitored constantly, forming a fragile but vital closed loop that mimicked Earth's own ecological cycles. Every person, young or old, had a role to play. Some maintained machines or cooked communal meals. Others took turns teaching classes to the children, and some kept watch on the health and morale of their fellow travellers. One morning, in a quiet corner of the common area, a teacher gathered a small group of children for their first lesson aboard. She drew a simple star map on a screen, gently explaining how far the ships would travel, and assuring the wide-eyed youngsters that one day they would reach a new home. The children listened in a mix of confusion and wonder, some still asking if they'd see their friends on Earth again soon. The teacher smiled sadly and spoke of brave explorers from history, likening these children to the sailors of old who crossed uncharted oceans. In their innocent faces, she saw future generations who would carry humanity's hope forward. Inside the living quarters, artificial gravity had been established by the slow rotation of the ship's habitat ring. After the weightlessness of launch and orbit, feeling a downward pull again, even one slightly gentler than Earth's, was strange yet comforting. Children gleefully tested the new gravity by skipping down the curved hallways, giggling when a single hop carried them higher and farther than it would have on Earth. Adults moved carefully at first, adjusting to walking on a floor that subtly curved up in the distance, and to the gentle Coriolis effect that made their heads swim if they turned too quickly. But before long, people walked and worked with growing confidence, adapting to the engineered gravity and the compact layout of their floating world. The ship itself became a small city among the stars. Curving corridors connected residential sections to dining halls, a medical bay, and recreation areas. Cabins were modest but thoughtfully designed, snug sleeping quarters where families pinned up photographs of Earth and little mementos of home to personalize their space. A central common area beneath a high, domed ceiling served as a communal gathering place. Its ceiling could project a blue daytime sky and cottony clouds, offering the comforting illusion of open air. Here, everyone came together for scheduled meals and meetings, or simply to sit under the faux sky and pretend for a while that they were back on their home planet. Down in the medical bay, the chief doctor unpacked supplies and medicines, preparing for any illnesses that might arise. During zero gravity, she had carefully secured every instrument. Now, under spin gravity, she double-checked that nothing would slip. She performed routine checkups on anxious passengers, soothing them with a gentle smile and reassuring words. A few cases of motion sickness and headaches appeared, expected stress responses, and she treated each patient patiently. In quiet moments, the doctor organized her digital medical library and thought of the colleagues she'd left behind. She silently vowed to keep everyone on this journey as healthy and safe as humanly possible. As the days passed, social life aboard blossomed in small but meaningful ways. At mealtimes in the common hall, people swapped stories about their hometowns, and the journeys that led them onto the ship, forging new friendships over shared memories and dreams. Children from different continents played together in improvised playrooms, their laughter echoing down the halls and reminding everyone that joy still lived among them. Children, especially the very young, adapted even faster than their elders. For them, the ship's strange new environment was a playground of wonders and adventure. Many would scarcely remember Earth at all. They would grow up with only stories and pictures of oceans and forests, while the stars outside their windows became their familiar backdrop. In the evenings, when the lights dimmed to simulate night, small groups often formed for quiet recreation. In one corner of the common area, a makeshift library took shape, stocked with well-loved books salvaged from Earth and countless stories stored on tablets, novels, histories, picture books of the landscapes they'd left behind. Some nights, a classic film from Earth would be projected on a blank wall, and dozens of passengers would gather to watch, sharing soft laughter and tears of nostalgia under the artificial twilight. On other evenings, a few passengers would produce musical instruments they had brought, a guitar, a violin, a harmonica or two, and softly play familiar tunes. A circle of young and old might form to listen to an elder recount folk tales from their homelands. These small moments of culture and camaraderie, blossoming in the metal confines of the ship, gradually turned steel and circuitry into something more like home. Not all activity was practical. Among the travellers were artists and writers already documenting this new chapter of humanity. One young woman sat by a window each day with a sketchpad, drawing the changing face of Earth as it shrank, and then sketching the starry vistas that replaced it. Another kept a private journal, crafting poems about exile and hope that quietly circulated among the crew. These creative pursuits helped many process the enormity of what they were experiencing, weaving the old world into the fabric of their new life. Not everyone adjusted easily. For some, the absence of open sky and the whisper of wind through real trees remained an ache that would not subside. A few passengers found themselves awake in the ship's artificial night, wandering dimly lit corridors with their thoughts drifting back to loved ones and landscapes they feared they might never see again. The ship's counselors, professionals aboard precisely to tend to emotional well-being, organised informal late-night gatherings in a cosy lounge. There, over warm drinks, people cautiously shared their feelings of loss, fear, and homesickness. Many tears were shed in those small hours. Yet in the sharing, they found solace. Time and again, a heavy silence would give way to reassuring smiles, a supportive arm around a shoulder, a collective sense that we are in this together. These intimate talks often ended with hugs or hands clasped in unity as the community knit itself tighter to face the unknown future side by side. 2 days after launch, a quiet announcement went through the ship. They had now travelled beyond the moon's orbit. A few gathered at an observation window on the upper deck to try to spot the moon. It was visible only as a tiny silver sliver far behind, almost lost in the darkness. The realization struck home. Humanity had never ventured so far from Earth with so many people before. What once had been the realm of a handful of Apollo astronauts was now the path of an entire society. In solemn acknowledgement of this milestone, the captain's voice came over the PA to mark the moment. A ripple of subdued cheers and applause spread through the halls. They were venturing beyond the last familiar waypoint of Earth's neighbourhood. It truly felt as though they were leaving the cradle of humankind. In the first week, faint radio transmissions from Earth still flickered in, but each day they grew weaker and more infrequent. One evening, the scheduled message time arrived, and nothing but soft static came through. The radio operators listened to the quiet hiss for a long moment, exchanging glances in the dim communications bay. Finally, someone murmured, "That's it then." A heavy silence fell as the crew relayed the news. No further signals had been received from Earth. Throughout the ship, people paused. There were tears, and there were long moments of stillness as many closed their eyes, as if in silent prayer or final farewell. The last fragile tether to Earth had gently fallen away. They were truly on their own now, in the vast, dark sea of space. Yet, even in solitude, life aboard continued, and hope endured. Each new dawn, created by the ship's lights, brought small joys. A birthday celebrated with improvised gifts and laughter. The first crisp lettuce leaves harvested from the hydroponic garden and shared at dinner. A toddler's first steps taken in low gravity met with cheers and clapping up and down the corridor. These humble milestones reminded everyone why they had embarked on this journey, to give humanity a chance to thrive, somewhere new. When people gazed out of the observation ports now, they looked not for the Earth that was gone, but forward into the star-strewn expanse ahead, toward whatever new world might one day welcome their descendants. Somewhere far beyond the veil of night lay the promise of a future they would never see, but had dared to hope for. For now, they carried the legacy of Earth with them, in their memories and traditions, in the knowledge and culture saved aboard, even in the very seeds and soil nurturing their gardens. They would protect that legacy, day by day, as they travelled through the long night of space. Sometimes, a few travellers would slip into the small observation dome at the very top of the ship. There, separated from the cosmic abyss by only a thick pane of crystal, they could gaze out at an undiluted universe. The pale band of the Milky Way, clusters of stars, and distant nebulae shining with ancient light. In those moments, the voyagers felt both incredibly small and profoundly connected to something greater. They would whisper their hopes and dreams into the silence, sending them out toward the stars. Truly alone now, the fleet pressed onward into the starry void. Inside each ship, life continued with a steady rhythm. The murmur of conversation during communal dinners, the patter of footsteps down curved hallways, the soft hum of ventilation keeping the air fresh and warm. These were the first steps of humanity's journey into the dark, a voyage born of both sorrow and hope. As the ships drifted farther from the sun, the travellers gradually turned their hearts toward the future. They would make do with the light they carried within, forging a family and a community among the stars to see them through the long night ahead.